Thank you for your patience. We'll call this meeting to order at 6:10. Welcome to the special session of council for Thursday, November 13th, 2023. This special meeting was called to receive the Community Hub Validation Report. And we have had a written request by Global Kingston to be able to record this evening's proceedings, and it's not for personal use. So according to the procedural bylaw, we will need a resolution to permit that this evening. Deputy Mayor.
Through your worship, I move that council permit Global News Kingston to record the special meeting of council this Thursday, November 9th, 2023 for the purposes of distributing information to the public.
So moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Proderick. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Please proceed. The next item is, as per section 7.6 of the township's procedural bylaw, the only business that is dealt with at a special meeting is that which is identified in the notice of the meeting. Therefore, there's typically no open forum included on the agenda for this evening. However, it came to our understanding that in a notification email sent out by the township on November 7th, 2023, to registered subscribers, it noted that there would be an open forum on tonight's agenda. So we want to be able to honor this publication. So I'm just going to ask now if anyone did attend this evening with the intention of speaking. Do you have one? So with that, we need to waive the procedural bylaw to allow this evening. That takes 2/3 of a vote of council. So I would ask, is there a member of council that would like to make a motion to waive the procedural bylaw to add open forum to the agenda? And again, it will take 2/3 of a vote, and it would open it for the standard 3 minutes per speaker. Councillor Budrick, so moved. Seconded by Councillor Parks. Any comments or questions? Being none, call the question. In favor? Motion is passed. If you would please come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and provide us with your information. There will be a clock coming up on the screen for 3 minutes, and we just ask that you adhere to it because it is going to be quite a lengthy meeting tonight.
My name's Harry Leslie. I live at 94 Manitou West in Amherstview. I would just like to request that from now on, we are fully informed of the full details of the involvement of the province in funding this project, including especially any monies that will flow from the OLG, since that is the stated purpose of the OLG, is to support community centers, pools, arenas. And if we could be updated on that in all communications in the future.
Thank you. Was there anyone else in the audience that wished to speak through open forum? And I would ask the virtual audience, if you wish to speak this evening in the open forum, please use the raised hand feature and we'll bring you into the meeting. None? Okay. Seeing none, that will conclude the open forum and we'll proceed with the agenda. So the next item will be confirmation of the agenda. And it will be that the agenda for November 9th, 2023 be adopted as amended, because it will include the open forum in the minutes. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Parks, so moved, seconded by Councillor Willis. All in favor? Motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof this evening? Being none, the item up for this evening is the W.J. Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Validation Report, and I would turn it over to our special projects engineer at this time for some presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to you and the members of council. Before we start, we just want to acknowledge that we've received a number of questions both from council and the public since the validation report was issued on Monday. We have compiled answers to these questions and circulated them to council, and they will be available to the public on the website after this meeting. So we're thrilled to be here today to speak to the project and the findings of our validation phase of the work. With me today presenting are a few members of Loyalist Township staff, as well as members from the project architect, MJMA, and a few members from the Chandos project team, who's acting as a general contractor for the project. So I will let them introduce themselves before we get into it. Chris, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening to you, Worship. I'm Chris Burbage, Senior Principal at MJMA Architects. We have a 35-year history of designing sports and recreation facilities for municipalities, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Chris. And then Will.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. I'm Will Foster, Project Director with Chandos Construction. We're a national general contractor who has operated in Canada for over 40 years. We have 7 offices that span the nation. We have over 700 employees, 100% employee owned, and we've completed over 20 aquatic and recreation facilities, completed and ongoing, I should say, and over 50 IPD projects completed and ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Hi, I'm Glenn Gardner, Senior Product Manager at Chandos. I've been working with the IPD team over the last few months to get us to where we are today, the validation report. And I'll pass you on to Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Lindsay Wharton with Chandos Construction. I'm an IPD coach here with Chandos and help support our teams across Canada.
And speaking on behalf of the township, will be myself, as well as Ms. Lamb, Ms. Campbell, and Mr. McDonald. So looking at the agenda for today, it is fairly lengthy, and there will be a few of us speaking to several items on here. We have broken it down into sections and allotted time for questions after each section, so please feel free to jump in then, or if you have something pressing that you would like to address, that is completely fine too. In terms of the agenda, so we will spend a bit of time going over the project overview, how we got to where we are today. Lindsay will then spend a bit of time talking about IPD, giving it a 101 on how it works, just to give a bit more understanding to both council and anyone watching from the public. We'll spend some time on the design of the proposed facility with a focus on what's changed since the last time we talked in March. Go over the proposed construction schedule, construction cost, the project financials in the form of the business case, and then the proposed resolutions that were included in the staff report. So getting right into it, the project really started in 2017 as part of the township Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which looked at the recreation needs for Loyalist Township 10 years into the future, so from 2018 to 2028. Included in the master plan was a number of recommendations on recreation facilities. And based on its findings, the township elected to conduct a feasibility study to see how many of these amenities can be included at the W.J. Henderson Recreation Center. So the study was completed in 2018 by MJMA and determined that a lot of amenities could be included on the site, ranging from a larger pool, gymnasium, fitness centers, municipal offices, and then a whole wide range of other amenities. Because of the scope of all those inclusions, combined with the fact that the pool was quickly approaching the end of its useful life, a decision to phase the project was made to make it more manageable. With the first phase prioritizing the construction of a new aquatic facility, accessibility upgrades in the building, and just life cycle replacements and as a whole. Future phases will look at the possibility of expanding the site to include a gymnasium and walking track and possibly municipal office. But for the purpose of right now, the focus is on that first phase of work. Since 2018, staff have applied to a number of grant programs to help fund the project. Most recently, the Green and Inclusive Community Building Fund, which is a federal program run through Infrastructure Canada. An application was submitted in 2021, and we received word that the application was successful in December of 2022 in the amount of $16.55 million. So the scope of work that was included in that grant application is what we are now referring to as phase 1 of the Community Hub project, which is the W.J. Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Project. Included in this is the construction of a new aquatic facility, upgrading the building so that it is accessible to all users and everyone in the community, the creation of an Indigenous legacy space in collaboration with the Gord Downie and Cheney Wenjack Fund, apologies, and energy conservation measures to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of the facility in accordance with the township's climate action plan. So even though this is a phase on its own, it is quite ambitious, and there's a few constraints associated with it. Most notably, working in an existing building and renovating it is always a challenge in itself, because you never know what is going to be in a wall that you might open up or under the ground that you might dig into. Maintaining access is also a fairly large constraint, in the sense that arena programming needs to be available throughout construction, and then the library needs to remain open as well. So keeping the safety of occupants and facility users is a fairly important aspect of the project, as is future-proofing the facility. How do we, as a township, make sure that the recreation needs of the municipality are met both today and in the future? The existing facility was built in 1975 and has lasted for the past 50 years. How do we ensure that the next 50 years are covered? And then finally, another fairly important constraint is around the timelines in the GICD grant, which state that projects must be complete and facilities operational by March of 2026, which is fairly tight for a project of this magnitude. So based on these constraints, we felt it appropriate that an integrated project delivery model be used to ensure that the project is delivered both on time, on budget, while meeting the constraints that were identified here. So I will turn it over to Ms. Worden to talk about integrated project delivery and its benefits.
Okay, so I'm going to just start with a quick overview of what is IPD, so everybody can follow along. In a traditional project landscape, things are usually carved up somewhat like this. If we think of, the different trades, designers, and partners involved, each of which is really only caring about what's inside of their scope of work or contract. In an IPD landscape, things look a little bit different. We draw a boundary around the entire project, contractually speaking, which tends to incentivize much different behavior. It means that we set up different ways of communicating together to allow for more collaboration, more transparency, and better results at the end. We all know, in many of the projects you've likely delivered or watched be delivered within the township, in a traditional world, an owner has a relationship with the architect or engineer, and then has a separate relationship and contract with the contractor. And usually it tends to play out a little bit like this. Things tend to get quite tense. There are many change orders. There's a ton of anxiety involved. And what we find is that IPD really sets things up quite differently. Of course, collaboration exists in every project, but on the spectrum of different types of contracts, you'll see at the far left side where the contract allows for less collaboration. That's more on the design, bid, build, or traditional end of the spectrum. And on the far right side, we have integrated project delivery, which has been used here today. A few of the key components of the contract, it means, all partners that are signed up are signing a single agreement rather than many separate agreements and many subcontracts. There is a shared risk and reward incentive, which means folks are incentivized to do what's best for the project so that it performs well. It's also marked by considerable financial transparency, much more than you would see in any conventional contract. And the team then puts the project first. The owner also plays a more significant role in the project success, and there's early involvement of project stakeholders, especially when it comes to trade input. And I think you'll see that when you get to see the design and construction side of the project as we present it. It's also marked by different behaviors, including mutual respect and trust, and open communication being really important. In a traditional project, an owner would typically start to understand what they were going to be designing and then work with a design team over the course of, say, 9 to 12 months on the design of a project, and then start to tender it and understand how it's going to be built based on construction documents, then only understanding who is going to build it once they put it out to public tender. In the case of IPD, we move all of that forward. So you're getting that input earlier on. This is quite a helpful diagram to show that. And when it comes to team structure within IPD, the project is really at the center of, the entire environment, where we're focused on achieving the goals of the owner and the values that we've established as a team, with everybody working centrally around that. And in function day-to-day, what it looks like is something like this. On the top right-hand side, you'll see we've got a definition here of the senior management team that's involved contractually in the project, in supporting the project. They're not involved in day-to-day, but are there to guide and mentor the team. In the top left-hand, there's a definition for project management team. So this is day-to-day members you actually see here on the panel today that are part of the team and lead the project. And then we also have experts coming in. You'll hear the term PIT or project implementation team tonight. And that's representing all of the other areas of expertise from each home company that are helping contribute to the project decisions and work for design and construction. Just a few overview of financial contract points to keep in mind. So I'll show these in a visual format in a minute, but profit in this project is separated from cost. So there is no incentive for any partner to make decisions that would increase scope because their profit is, kind of divorced from any of that activity. Profit's also placed at risk, which means, we need to win as a team. Otherwise we lose as a team as well. Cost is guaranteed, but not profit. Change orders are restricted in this model. It's not marked by considerable change orders at all. And then final profit is based on the project, not an individual, but it's the team's outcome. And risk and reward plans are tuned to the goals. So we don't release profit until the project is performing along the way. Just quickly, so you understand, in a typical project, things we know are broken down into different packages of work. And if we just call out one particular package, let's say the drywall trade, it's made up of, a similar buckets of cost along the way: direct, indirect, and overhead costs, and then risk and profit. So what the team does from the very onset in validation is works to remove risk and manage it collectively in something known as a risk register. So this team spent considerable amount of time setting their risk register for their project, which means that each individual does not carry their own risk in their numbers. This is far more effective in keeping costs in line and managing as a team. Glenn will give you some specifics on some of the risk register items that were called out for this project. And then profit is also, like I said, set aside. So it's not going to increase along the way of the project. It's going to stay in a fixed price and is only rewarded to the team should they perform well, or in the case of a surprise, should it come up, profit is drawn down upon to help cover that cost. So what ends up happening really is we have a bucket for costs and a bucket for profit for the project. And I'll go through a couple examples here. In validation right now, what you'll see is a presentation of target cost. So that's the team's plan in that left-hand column. And then we have 4 possible scenarios of how this could play out. In the first scenario, the team does well. Everything goes according to plan. The team receives their profit proportionate to their share of the pie. And then in the second scenario, something goes sideways and the team must pay out from their profit a little bit towards covering that cost that they weren't expecting. Something may have happened. They either admit, during validation, we missed something, or something came up during the course of construction. And then the third scenario, things go quite well. In this case, the team is tracking along the way these financials. And, the owner receives 50% of savings that are achieved by the team. So in this case, they would get $500,000. The team would get an extra 500 as well. And the owner can also choose to reinvest in the project should they want to. We also have a wish list item that Glenn will share for this project to show you how, if the team is performing well, you could make decisions to add things back into the project along the way. And the last scenario is the one most people are most curious about. This is where profits eroded entirely. It's very rare that this happens in research across all IPD projects in Canada and even in North America. This is accounting for 2 to 3% of projects landing in this boat. When this happens, the team has quite advanced notice that things are trending this way because of the financial transparency and rigorous tracking. But in this case, the team has eroded their profit and their risk register entirely. And at this point, they're just being reimbursed for costs to complete the work. The one thing I would note about that last scenario, yes, it is possible it could happen, but very small percentage based on data. But if that case does happen, from an owner perspective, what you're getting for each dollar is much more than you would get in a conventional project where, let's say for a change order, you might get 40 cents on the dollar for what you're paying into. a lot of it is kind of held. That's the opportunity in a traditional sense for more profit to be taken in that change order context. So CCDC 30 came out in 2018 and, is marked by 4 different distinct phases. We've just completed validation for this project. And as part of that, the team has really worked to answer this question based on the Township of Loyalists' values for the project, saying we can build this building that does these things in this much time for this much money. And then when it comes to the numbers, we worked early on to understand the budget for the project, come to an expected cost, and we're now at a point of having a confirmed base target cost where you can see that commit to cost and sign contracts. So that's just a kind of point in time we are at the project right now, where the team has built their consensus, their contract will be signed based on that amount, and they'll continue to perform to that committed cost, schedule, and scope and quality. They'll also use a process in lean construction delivery known as target value design. It's a management practice that drives design to deliver customer values and develops design within project constraints. So they'll continually be informed by cost and making decisions as they go so that there's more confidence in performing well to the project. And just to give you a couple of visuals, co-location is a really important aspect of IPD, and the team works collaboratively in a big room together on a weekly basis to make decisions and collaborate with effective teamwork. And then as they transition to construction, this is one of our project big rooms on site. You can see just different clusters of folks there, designers, superintendents, foremen walking around the site, as well as leaders at the back there having a bit of a huddle. And IPD has really taken off in public sector in Canada. Perhaps you've already been aware of this from past presentations, but there are many other municipalities you can connect with to get their experience and take on how their project was successfully completed. And there are also infrastructure and facility investment projects just that we've been tracking here in our own data. And really the benefits have become clear. There's a lot better opportunities for earlier start, early warning signs when things go sideways. And, the transparency and improved quality in decision-making is a huge benefit when it comes to delivering this way, especially for public sector. And there's marked transparency and rigor in tracking. So we always have great data to share on project performance. And there's a ton of sharing and learning. I can say from the project teams I've worked with, hundreds of different people, once they've completed an IPD project, they tend to not want to go back to delivering a traditional project. Here's some statistics just on Canada. There's 80 known IPD projects, about 4.1 billion in contracted work to date, with about 1 billion complete. And of those 31 projects, right now we've got one that's tracked over target cost. Just one last note here, we don't tend to have too many projects that are the same in IPD space, but we do work on a lot of schools. In a traditional project that's 35 million, you can see that it took 9 months to get to tender in that traditional sense, where it's 4 months in a validation phase with much higher confidence. And also investing 500,000 in an IPD setting versus 1.8 on a design, for a traditional project is quite different. And, just that last line, I think is worth noting. There are a ton of projects and change orders in traditional projects, and here in IPD, you'll likely see far less. Thanks very much. I will turn it back to Rami. Thank you.
So for the context of the project team on this particular IPD project, it has grown over time. So we started off with MJMA, who's been involved since 2018 with the original feasibility study. The request for proposal that was used to procure their services included a clause to allow the successful proponent to stay onto the project or subsequent phases of the project subject to satisfactory performance. So based on the work that MJMA completed, which was very good, they were retained for the project and have been with us every step of the way since. After receiving direction from council to proceed with the IPD route, the township procured the services of a general contractor as defined by CCDC 30. So this was a fairly lengthy process. You probably remember us back here in March talking about it. It was overseen by the procurement office, which is a law firm that specializes in municipal procurement. And the successful proponent was identified as Chandos Construction. With these two main partners identified, we then went to work seeking partners, both consultants and trade partners, to help us with validation and to carry through through design and construction. So in terms of consultants, Intuitive and Intraba. So Intuitive is handling the structural and envelope design, while Intraba is handling the mechanical and electrical design and the sustainability aspect of the project. Modern Niagara is the mechanical electrical trade partner. They are fairly well versed in these types of projects and have a local Kingston office that that is supporting the project. And Acapulco Pools, one of the leaders in pool construction in Ontario, is handling the aquatic portion of the project. So this team was onboarded in July 2023, which is when validation officially started, and we got to work putting together the information that we're presenting tonight. So the project team was made up of all these different partners and broke down into different project implementation teams, as Lindsay mentioned. So this was different team members from the different partners with the relevant expertise to handle a specific portion of the project, be it mechanical and energy or electrical or estimating construction, to make sure that the people who knew what they were talking about were in the room together, talking about that aspect of the project to make sure all the details were ironed out and that we could proceed to where we are today with a fairly high level of certainty. So with that leads us to the first break for questions. So Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Council, any questions on this portion of the presentation? Councillor Budrick.
Through you, sir. Just curious on the sub-trades and everything like that. Did we have our general contractor work with them to bring them in, or was that something that you guys did, or I'm just curious?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor. So the partners were onboarded through a competitive procurement process, which was led by the general contractor. But you know, they were evaluated against a set of criteria in terms of, have they done previous IPD projects? Do they share the same values in terms of collaboration and innovation? And would they be a good fit for this project? So yes, they were procured competitively. So moving into the next phase of the presentation, we'll be going over facility design. So I will turn it over to Mr. Burbidge.
Thank you. Facility design. Okay. Good to show some colored photos here, which hopefully everyone can be excited about. I know you've all seen it before, and so I'm not going to dwell on it in great detail. I'm going to focus on the changes that have happened since the last time we presented to you, I think, as the most important outcome of this discussion. But to reiterate what Rami said earlier, this project is about sort of five, in my view, five main moves. One is the addition of a new aquatic hall on the east side of the building. One is the replacement and refurbishment of the ice rink itself and the arena. There is accessibility upgrades and modifications to the existing change rooms, as well as the inclusion of a legacy space through the work with the Chani Wenjack Fund in the center at the core of the building, and that remains the same today. But through this process, and I think it's been a really good one described in the IPD process that takes lean principles to try to deliver the maximum value in the most efficient way, for the least amount of dollars, and getting it to you as soon as possible. We've made modifications to some of the designs, and I'm going to go through that in the plans. This is sort of a sampling of one of those, and I'm going to get to it in the detailed plans in future slides. But right here, I think the main thing to talk about is changes that happened. Was one, you see the X's on the large green park space. That was a sort of a future planned long-term vision for parkland around the new pool aquatic center. So that was never really part of this actual current project. It was always anticipated, and it would be looked to be funded in a future phase. So that isn't forming part of the priced project that you're seeing today. And second, I think it's really at the core of the project. We started off with a fully universal change room facility design in the earlier days. And as a result of public engagement and feedback from the community and the design for accommodating all users equally, we reverted to a kind of a male, female, and family change room arrangement. So that's been developed and worked through in this design and priced as well. The building shape remains as we presented it before. It's not just a simple austere box added to the side of the building. It's got a little bit of shape to create a little bit of attraction and become a destination for people to come to this facility. But also, adding that sloped roof has practical benefits. That allows us to shed water to fewer roof drains, and it keeps rainwater leaders and piping out off the ceiling of the pool facility, which should keep it actually more attractive looking and less busy, and also provide less mechanical equipment to maintain over time, especially over a pool where you don't want to have to drain the pool to do that sort of thing. So there's reason behind all these moves, and I think that's been kind of worked through really well with our partners in Chandos and our planners at Loyalist. Other things that have happened is we've reduced the size of glazing to deliver and provide glazing that does what it needs to do without being too much, not going full height and costly installation and capital dollars, but it just gives you views where you need it. And we've maintained this high clear story window over the pool hall, which is great for natural light and eliminating glare on the water, but still illuminating it naturally to help you be able to reduce reliance on artificial lighting. Simply, in the ground floor plan, this is the working floor of the arena with the change rooms, and this is the heart of the mechanical systems for the pool. Servicing all happens on this level, and the change rooms serving the rink are occurring here. The only changes that have happened since the last time we talked was the reversing of location of the staff room and the main electrical room. And this was actually through investigation. We realized that there would be much more savings to be had by eliminating costly relocation of incoming infrastructure by keeping the electrical room where it was. And that made perfect sense from a delivery of value to the project. And the other one was a very similar case where we moved a universal washroom from one location where it was going to involve a lot of underpinning and structural work to an extra open space in the plan. So again, a result of that kind of collaborative effort with Chandos. And their direct involvement is really a testament to the power of lean thinking. On the ground floor, very similar. We spent some time adjusting the public washroom renovation to align it to existing services, so there'd be less rework of that infrastructure, and while still delivering a universal washroom plan. And in the case of the doorway into the pool hall, that used to be a large vestibule with an overhang, and that was eliminated because operationally it was decided that that would not serve as an extra front door. That would be just an exit only. And so we're directing all people to still come in the main doors as you do now in the facility, leading you to the lobby space. And again, just another example of keeping an eye on delivering the full value of the project without doing anything extra to add cost. In the case of this is one more example of that this kind of approach of delivering more value for less money. This is the cross section you see here of the pool hall, and in it there used to be some fixed bleacher seating for the 200 people that can view the pool, and this was changed to a movable furniture solution. Bleachers like you'd see on the side of a soccer field, and this simple move eliminated much capital dollars, but at the same time allows staff to use that space and move those bleachers and gain back valuable deck space for teaching and team gathering during larger events. So this is actually, I think, a benefit to the job overall. At the same time, you can see we're maintaining that high clear story window above to drop that natural light down and illuminate all that space for great viewing of the pool. And here's a rendering of that view where you see the clear story. Because of the positioning of the building, that clear story is facing north and east, which is the best to avoid direct sunlight, but still get soft natural light like in an artist studio. And the oval is highlighting a window that was eliminated because although it's nice in its rendering, in actual fact, the south light is a great producer of glare. So by changing that back to a solid material, we're actually, I think, improving the performative value of the pool hall itself. Here's a small view of the a kind of roof off view, AXO, of the heart of the building, and that's the main lobby, and with a view of the actual ice rink. These blue lines are representing changes that have happened since we last saw you, and it's quite simply there are a few modifications just to note here. One, although we're still creating a new kind of skybox design at the center ice within the ice arena, and you can see kind of in the middle of the image over top of the access route between the bleachers. That's a spot where barrier-free seating is being implemented in the arena, and that's being maintained. We were doing the same on the north and south ends, or the east and west ends of the arena as skyboxes, but those have been eliminated, and we're taking the existing windows along the concourse that you know today and dropping them down to the floor. So they become much bigger in terms of glazing and the ability for barrier-free seating to exist along that whole concourse on the warm side of the glass. In addition, we're adding handrails at all the stairs leading down the bleachers to improve safety and accessibility throughout the bleacher area. One item at the bottom of the image, you can see an X. There was a barrier-free raised platform added earlier on at the ice level for barrier-free viewing. That has been eliminated and is anticipated it'll be delivered in a future phase when funding permits. Here's a view of the lobby space. This is like the heart of the building. And it's really something we wanted to focus on in creating a much more vibrant place for the public to come and gather, people to meet, exchange stories, wait for their loved ones as they're coming out of the change room or waiting while someone's having practice on the ice. And we did work through this this image in this space with our Indigenous consultation with the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, and we've earmarked money in the budget to fit out the lobby with natural materials and also skylights to bring in natural light into that space to soften it as much as possible, make it a great gathering space. And that design will continue to evolve as we work through more Indigenous engagement in the design phase itself as well. And I'm going to leave it there.
Before I turn it over to Ms. Lamb for programming, this feels like a good spot to maybe pause for questions to see if there's any questions around design.
Council, any questions so far? Councillor Prodrick.
Through you, your worship, just a couple of on the changes, if I may. The bleachers, are they a folding bleacher? And do you have an idea of how much savings there was by changing sort of the thought on the bleachers?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So whether or not they're folding is still to be determined. So they're aluminum, but you know, the more moving parts you add, there's just more things to break. So we'll be balancing that out throughout design. In terms of cost savings, it was in the order of magnitude of a few $100,000 to go from concrete bleachers to the aluminum ones. So not insignificant by any means,
Okay.
especially given the additional programming that comes with it.
All right, and if I can just follow that up, so is storage of that those bleachers, however format they're gonna be an issue, or is that pretty well factored into all the decisions, I assume?
Yeah, so again, going back to the concept of project implementation teams, it's the designers working closely with facilities operations to make sure that whatever we do design works for them. So the concept, and maybe I don't want to speak out of turn here, so I might defer to Ms. Lamb on this one, but the concept seems to be well received. Do you want to speak to it?
Thank you. The concept would be that the bleachers would be designed in a way that whether they'd be, most likely they'd be a flip up style. We're trying to avoid anything that in that type of an atmosphere would have additional components that could rust or anything like that. So the flip up seems to be something that's going to work, but can be moved and kept in an area, but create open space for teams to do, whether it be dry land or for our advanced leadership courses to be able to do the work on the floor that they could do, whether it be rescue work on the floor surface that they away from the pool deck. So it gives them extra space. But we can then move those bleachers to one end or the other. But they would be, the idea is they would still be maintained in that space. They wouldn't be moved from that space and stored in an alternative area. They would be kept in the pool hall area.
And if I may, one more, your worship. The accessible platform at ice level, kind of disappointed that's out of the plan. Can you just give me your rationale and thoughts on that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. We were a bit disappointed to see it go to. It was a cost saving measure. So we can look at bringing that back in either in future phases of work or if budget allows for it. But from a program perspective, we prioritize keeping the skyboxes in the scope of work first and foremost, and scale back on everything else just to make sure that we were trying to keep the costs as low as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Just wondering if is there anything or much of anything in the design of phase one that with sort of a nod to the potential phase two, and particularly the potential gym that may be attached to this building, or is that sort of pretty much a totally separate design project process?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we will cover this in a later slide, but the work that was done in the design made sure that future phases of work were not impeded. And we'll go over that in a bit too.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you. So I will turn it over to Ms. Lamb to talk about how the facility will actually be programmed.
Thank you. So I won't take too much time because I know we've already talked several times about programming itself. But try and get through here. So you've heard a lot about the building, but what is the impact that the facility is actually going to have on our community and our residents? It is facilities like this that is the heart of our community. Year-round, the community wants a facility where residents can go and meet, where visitors can come and enjoy recreation, leisure pursuits, socialize, and spend time together. The renewed facility will allow our residents and visitors to experience new and expanded programming and new pursuits. These are things that, we're hoping to introduce that they haven't seen in the past and or bring back that they haven't seen quite some time, I'll say pre-COVID. Programming will be inclusive. There'll be structured and unstructured programming. So what I mean by that is there'll be opportunities for them to come into the facility and have creative play. So they'll be able to come in and do, for instance, let's say youth pickup nights where they can come in and just, do what they want to do at their leisure. And they'll be able to come in and actually do registered programs as well. And there'll certainly be opportunities for all ages. The facility is home to many local organizations who host many events. This facility will be important for them as they look to continue to grow and expand, and they'll be looking for opportunities for those events to help their organizations thrive. But those events help our community thrive as well. Certainly special events are a big thing for us as well. So ultimately, they each have a very positive economic impact for our community and our region. From an aquatic perspective, and I realize this slide looks very busy. Certainly something that we're looking at doing is multi-programming the pool. Going to an 8-lane, 25-meter pool is a very big deal. It allows us to run multiple different types of programming at one time. So the days of only being able to run one program at one time would be gone. We'd be able to look at lane swims and hosting a swim club at the same time, or aquafit and swimming lessons at the same time. It also gives us the ability to run something in the leisure pool differently than what we're running in the lap pool. So lots of opportunities. What's going to be key too for us is we're looking at a facility that we're running year round, anywhere from 12 to 16 hours a day, depending on the time of year. So this is going to be important as we look to run swim programs like swimming lessons, advanced swimming programs. The leadership courses are key to our future as we continue to staff that pool. And as we continue to try to send our youth forward and try to introduce them to new career opportunities. We're looking at things like lane swim, aquafit, boot camp, aqua yoga, baby and me. These are all courses that we hear from our community members, but there's also new opportunities for them to get involved in. Leisure swims are also popular. Regular facility users are always looking to come in and use our facility. School board is still looking to continue their Swim to Survive program and continue to have their swim teams and their school groups come in to use the facility. And of course, there's our Ernestown Barracuda Swim Club, who we've already met with ahead of this meeting, and they are certainly still alive and thriving. And they are actually now working with Vicky Keith and have some actually pair swimmers that are working with their club as well. So that's exciting moving forward. Special Olympics is still swimming as well, and we'll be looking to use the facility. And then, of course, things like rentals, birthday parties, things like that. So from an aquatic perspective, we anticipate that the facility will continue to be busy, but each day is a different day, but that facility will require a lot of attention as we move it forward. Arena programming is an opportunity for us. We have always had a very busy ice surface. It's the floor surface, the floor season, I'll call it, that we have lots of opportunity to expand. So the ice season, we will continue to push forward and try to continue to maximize, but that floor season will be looking for new opportunities, whether it be continuing to try to expand a lacrosse group or ball hockey, but also looking at events. I'll use the word pickleball. We all love the word pickleball, but we'll be looking at a mix of rentals and township programming as we move forward with the arena. And then we're looking at other programming. It's not just about those two spaces. It's how are we using that entire facility to create experiences for people moving forward. So we will have the multi-purpose room at the end of the hallway, which is currently where the canteen is. So when you're looking at this floor plan, it's space 7 and 8, and then as well as what we currently call the library boardroom. These will be spaces that'll be available for the community to use. Then we'll talk a bit about the City of Kingston partnership. So the City of Kingston partnership actually started back in 2019 when there was discussion about the Canadian Infrastructure Program, Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program grant, where the township applied for the grant with partnership opportunity with the City of Kingston. That was when first discussion came about. Unfortunately, the township was not successful with that grant opportunity. But moving forward to today, the City of Kingston is still interested in partnership. So in September, the City of Kingston Council did agree to move forward with, should this council wish, to move forward with partnership with the township with an offer of 6.55 million capital contribution towards the aquatic portion of the facility to be paid over 3 years, 2024, 2025, 2026. In exchange, what they would be looking for is equal access for their residents to the aquatic facility for 20 years. So what this would mean is traditionally today, if we were to open registration for our programs, our township residents would get first opportunity for registration. 72 hours later, non-township residents would then have an opportunity for registration. What it means, and I'm going to apologize. I'm supposed to take medication. What it would mean is that at that time, if we accept if we accept the terms of the offer, the City of Kingston residents would be recognized as township residents, and City of Kingston residents would be able to register the same time as township residents. So the 72 hours would be waived for City of Kingston residents. It would also mean that in the future, if the township was to move forward with a different fee structure for non-residents, the City of Kingston residents would be recognized as township residents. So ultimately, no matter what the township did for the 20 years, the City of Kingston residents would be recognized as township residents for all aquatic registered programs and or drop-in programs for the pool. So there'd be no waiting period and the same fees. So traditionally with an 8-lane, 25-meter pool, a pool of this size would ultimately serve a community of about 35,000 people, roughly. So previously with the WJ, the 5-lane, 25-meter pool, we were at capacity for the most part. A lot of our programs, popular programs for the younger kids were sold out. We were at capacity. The 25% number that most of you have probably heard with the registration number, a lot of our registered programs, City of Kingston residents were filling it at about 25% pre-COVID. So that's where the 6.55 million came from, is 25% of the aquatic portion of the cost to build the pool. So we as staff are confident today that there would not be an issue with registration, but that is without having a crystal ball. I can't tell you what it looks like in 5 years for the demand for children's swimming lessons, and I can't tell you what it looks like in 10 years. I can tell you that today, if we were to open registration to fully, if I go back a few slides to this, and we're able to fully program the pool like we want to with fully staffed, we should not have an issue with accepting all of the children we want to accept into our programs. That's based on being able to have all the staff we necessarily need to run those programs. So, so the City of Kingston agreement, I don't have a crystal ball, but the City of Kingston is willing to contribute the 6.55 million as a contribution, recognizing their residents being accepted. The majority of the residents that we're seeing that come in the past are obviously from the west end of the city. The City of Kingston is currently undergoing an aquatic study to determine what their future needs are for pools. So they're not solely, at this point, they're not solely dependent on just us building a pool, but they have not yet made a decision on what it looks like for them for pools in the future. That is yet to be determined, and we don't know what that looks like in the future as well. So with that said, I will pass it on.
Maybe it might be a good idea to take an opportunity to go over questions on programming while they're still fresh in our minds.
Thank you. Council, any questions at this time? Councillor Ennis.
Thank you. Through the mayor, for the City of Kingston contribution, the 25%, and that usage is based on pre-COVID, when the City of Kingston residents, as you said, the 72-hour delay. If Kingston residents are given equal access, equal, same price, same day access, do we expect the 25% to remain the same for usage?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I would expect that it would remain the same given the current climate for pool access and what we're experiencing in the region. Given the what is available for lessons and what we're experiencing and what we're seeing for the need for lessons in the area, I would expect today that if we were to open registration today, that we would see 25% come in. And for for specific groups. I wouldn't say it's for all groups, though. There are specific younger age groups that we're seeing that requirement is for, as the children are moving through and they're getting the basic, I'll say, the basics of learning how to swim, where they start to age out some. So I will say that as of today, given the current pool availability, I would say yes.
Any other questions at this time? Councillor Proderick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe a bit on the same line as Councillor Ennis. Has there been any discussion? I know we're not there yet with Kingston about, here's a scenario I just want to throw at you to make sure the township is protected. Maybe our programming opening first and then Kingston's a week later, like, you know, in terms of coordinate time, so that, you know, there's a bit of protection in a sense, and that Kingston still offers programs, like they're not going to drop programs somewhere and then we're left holding the ball. You know what I mean? Like, is there going to be protections in that sense?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there hasn't been specific conversations to protect the township saying you must continue to offer. When we had the discussions with council, the discussion came up is, would our pool meet the need of both the city of Kingston and the township? And staff's response was no, it would not meet the need of both. The city of Kingston is continuing to do a feasibility study related to aquatics and an aquatic study and the need for additional pool requirements. And that study, although not yet released, the city of Kingston staff have clearly stated that there is a need for more pools in the area and in the region. But no, there has not been a specific discussion related to the city of Kingston having to, you know, build more pools and or can't close or stop their own programming.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just throwing it out there so that, so in terms of the Kingston contribution, whether, you know, Kingston gives X dollars and when they get access, no matter what happens, we're still running those programs. So it's in terms of staffing, it doesn't make any difference, does it? Because we would still be paying staff if you had a program of, I don't know, 10 and you needed 20 to make a financial go of it. It's all capital, but still in effect, although people may say, well, you're paying staff, we're going to pay them anyways, right? To run these programs, hopefully, you know, with registration, et cetera. Fair statement to say?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So when we run aquatic program or recreation programs, we usually have a minimum number required to operate the program. In aquatics, we try to run the program no matter what. We look at specifically swimming lessons. Swimming lessons we look at as a life skill. So we try to run the program no matter what. And if we have to, you know, if you have two levels that are very close, if we have to put the levels together to operate the program, we will. So yes, we would ultimately be running the program no matter what. So we would be attempting to run that program. Yep.
Councillor Parks.
Thank you. For Ms. Lamb also, just wondering if you have any idea where the city of Kingston is at with their feasibility study, if they've started it, if they're halfway through it, if it's coming back to council in the next year or so?
I can, through you, Mr. Mayor, I can certainly attempt to answer this, and if not, maybe our CAO or my director might be able to answer it. But my understanding is the study has started and that it was to be expedited quite quickly. And my understanding is if at all possible, it was to be presented back to their council by the new year. Is that quite accurate? Yeah, by the new year. Hopefully sometime in the new year.
Councillor Willis. Okay, I'll come to this side next.
Through your worship. I think this is terrific. 20 years is a long marriage. Is there a divorce clause? Is there a method for early termination that we could pay them back at a prorated amount if for some reason it's not working for our community?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are currently, we have not seen, well, we've seen the first draft of an agreement, so we can certainly negotiate some clauses within that agreement to and propose such a clause in that agreement. So that is something we could work toward if that is council's wish.
Deputy Mayor Town.
Yes, thank you through you, your worship. This may get answered towards the financial discussion, but it seemed apropos given that we're talking about the agreement. Is it the township's intent to negotiate a shared portion of the operating costs for programming with the city of Kingston? And would that be on a similar proportion, like the 25% or something along those lines?
Through your worship, at this point, the city of Kingston has made reference to certainly being open to discussions about operating contributions. We haven't started that discussion yet.
Are there any further questions at this time? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you. So the last element of the design that we wanted to cover was the building systems themselves. So how is the physical building going to work? So when we reference building systems, what we mean is the heating and cooling of the space, ventilation, making the ice for the arena, filtering the pool water, and then providing domestic water. So there's a few elements that need to be considered when designing these. So the efficiency of the system as a whole, is it easy to operate? How do we optimize its life cycle so that it's effective from day one all the way to 30 years from now when it needs to be taken out of service? How do we make optimal use of space? How do we base the system selection based on the local climate and the available technologies? How do we minimize downtime of the facility? How do we procure items and install them so that we can still provide ice when we need to provide ice and still heat the building when the building needs to be heated? And then finally, how do we make it future proof? How do we make it net zero ready if that's the direction that the township wants to proceed with in the future? So the first element is considering life cycle consideration. So there's a whole lot of equipment in the building right now. A lot of it is original and a lot of it is coming to the end of its useful life. So this actually presents a fairly good opportunity to replace them as part of the project so that the building is set for the next 25, 30 years. So we considered every single piece of equipment and when it was scheduled for replacement, either in the city's asset management plan or the assessment of their conditions from service providers like Simcoe who provide a lot of the rink equipment. So for example, if we look at the table on the right side of your screen, the compressors and dehumidifiers for the arena are scheduled to be replaced in the next year or two. So that makes things a little bit more expensive when we look at the mechanical line items in the budget, but it is going to happen eventually. So how do we actually design it so that everything now talks to each other really well? Conversely, how can we reuse equipment when we can reuse it? So the heat exchanger for the ice plant was replaced in 2018 and is probably going to be good until 2042. So it has been integrated into the design, so we didn't have to go out and buy a new one. And then finally, the term future proof is used. So the system is designed as a whole. We're replacing what we need to replace now and not touching what's fine. But when those items do need to be replaced, so the heat exchanger, for example, for the ice plant is currently an ammonia-based system. The industry seems to be trending towards CO2 because it is a little bit safer and a little bit more efficient. So when it comes time to replace it, can the new building system as a whole accommodate a CO2 plant? Yes, it can. So, just looking at elements like this, and then, for example, the arena lighting was completed in 2016. There's no sense in touching it now. It fits the bill. We don't need to go out and replace it and spend another $250,000 on that. So just taking all these things into consideration gives us that certainty that we need moving forward, that we're only touching what needs to be touched, but that everything will work properly for the next 20, 30 years. The comfort of occupants is obviously front of mind. We've all sat in buildings where the air is stale and not comfortable and it's very humid, but especially in a pool environment where the chloramines coming off of the pool are technically not the healthiest thing that you could be ingesting. So thinking about someone swimming laps, breathing in these chloramines, not the best thing for them. Generally speaking, if you walk into a facility and you can smell chlorine, odds are it hasn't been designed very well. So the team that we have on board is actually very well versed at designing these systems in a way that the chloramines and other pollutants are removed from the air, so that it's just a comfortable space for people to live in, so or to play in. So if we look at the cross section of the pool here, there's air supply that pushes air across the pool, both at water level and in the ceiling. So really, we're clearing everything out, putting fresh air in and taking all the bad stuff out. So again, these are all things that might seem trivial, but they're central to a proper experience for users. And then the last part, and this is maybe me showing my own bias because I think this is really interesting, so you'll have to forgive me. But just looking at the system as a whole, this is a very simplified sketch of how everything works in the building. So we'll break it down. Just looking at the pool and atrium area of the building. So the heart of the system, the mechanical heart of the building system, is this green circle at the center of the screen. That's a water source heat pump, very similar to an air source heat pump. They're all the rage these days for home heating and cooling. Just a little bit more efficient because it draws heat and cold from water instead of outside air. So that system will provide heating and cooling loads to both pools, domestic hot water, and then just HVAC heating, as well as cooling loads to the building, so air conditioning and the pool dehumidifier. And it's supplemented with an electric boiler to provide it with hot water when it needs it. And if we look at the other side of the building, if we look at the other side of the building, the arena itself, the ice plant has to make cold to make ice. But in doing so, it produces a whole lot of hot air or of wasted energy. So under the current system, and if it was just an arena that was being operated as designed 30 years ago, we would make ice, that heat would be vented out and it would be wasted, which is quite literally burning money, if you think about it. So what we have an opportunity to do here is actually combine both of these systems so that they work together. So what I mean by that is now the heat that is produced off of the ice plant now supplements or provides a heating load to the heat pump, which means your boilers don't kick in as often and can be smaller and therefore cheaper. And then another fairly interesting aspect of the design that's being proposed is this little circle on the top left called ice storage. So think about it like a big battery where it takes a lot of energy to make ice. And if you have to run your systems at when the demand is high, you have to size the systems to be really big. So the transformer outside has to be sized for a specific load. But by being able to produce ice at night when there's less of a demand, now all of our electric systems can be a little bit smaller. And again, we save money that way. And then again, the ice storage is also a really good opportunity to provide cooling loads to the water source heat pump when it needs it. So the reason for putting this forward, and again, I apologize if my biases are showing a little bit, is just to drive home the point that a lot of the systems in the building have to be replaced. It's a really good opportunity to replace everything in a way that is energy efficient. So we're no longer venting heat from the ice plant to the outside. We're now capturing it and using it to heat the pool. So just very efficient system, which will help us meet our climate goals. So if we look at it from an energy conservation aspect, the measures that this system allows us to implement help reduce the overall energy and use intensity of the building. So waste heat capture, we've talked about that, but we're also proposing a few different things such as cold water ice resurfacing. So right now, the Zamboni, whenever it has to go out, hot water gets put in the tank and then applied to the ice. There is technology now that allows the use of cold water for ice resurfacing, which means, again, now your boilers can be that much smaller because you don't need to have a whole lot of hot water just sitting ready to be put onto the ice. Similarly, in the Zamboni melt pit, right now, Zamboni comes in after doing its thing, dumps a whole bunch of snow in the pit. An operator stands there with a hose of hot water and just hoses it down so that everything can melt and go into the sewage system. Whole lot of hot water required for that, whole lot of energy required for that. By taking that waste heat from the ice making plant, we eliminate that step. And then another very basic one that isn't implemented right now is building automation. Just turning lights off when no one's in there through the use of sensors and winding the facility down at night because no one's in it can go a long way to reducing our energy demand. So if we look at it from a energy use intensity, so per square metered, right now the existing building is about 557 kilowatt hours per meter squared. We'd be going down to 407. And we presented another scenario here, which is if we were to design the proposed building to the bare minimum requirements of the Ontario Building Code, our energy intensity would actually go up to 701 kilowatt hours per meter squared. So what does that mean for the building? So the building is getting 30% bigger, but the energy intensity, total energy consumption per year is very similar. A lot of the systems are being electrified and the use of natural gas is being phased out. There's a little bit left that you can see on your screen there. And that's it's as part of the heating systems on top of the library that are not being touched. So once those systems are retired, and I believe 15 years is when they're scheduled for replacement, they can be integrated into the building systems that are being proposed, going back to that concept of future proofing. And again, if we looked at the building design and that SB10 bare minimum scenario, the consumption goes up pretty drastically from over 3 million kilowatt hours to over 5 million. And then looking at that from a energy or greenhouse gas emissions perspective, the existing building on average between 2016 and 2019 emitted about 390 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. In our GICB application, our commitment was to get to 234 or below. Based on the energy models that have been produced to date, we think that we are actually at 115 now. So we're fairly well below that target. And just going back to that last scenario of SB10, if we were to just put a whole lot of natural gas boilers in the building to heat the pools, we would actually go up from 390 to 644, which is a fairly significant net increase. And if we tie that into the township's climate action goals, 2016 was our baseline year for the emissions from municipally owned and operated buildings. We produced 861 tons of CO2 equivalent. The target in this category was to reduce that to 439 or lower by 2031. So through the implementation of this project, we would be taking 275 tons away from that 2016 baseline, which represents a fairly large portion towards our goal. So with that, I will turn it over to Luke, who's going to go over site plan.
Yes, thank you. All right, so when we're looking at the site plan, there's a couple things to consider. So the first off is going back to the 2017 and 2018 master planning exercise that occurred for the site. And you can see that represented with the blue hatches, which identifies further areas for future expansion of the site. So that goes back to those comments made regarding a gymnasium or municipal office or council chambers or whatever is desired. Those areas within the site can be tied in effectively without having the current planned expansion impact that. So that's been considered when we're looking at the site as a whole. A couple other items to note there is through the studies done to date, we've identified that there will be a minor variance required for the site to accommodate parking. So we'll be asking for a reduction in parking spaces from the bylaw. So that will be going to committee of adjustment in the future if this project is moving ahead. A couple other items is just related to the servicing of the site. So water and sanitary servicing of the site is currently through a township owned block over to Westran, and that's going to remain in place with just some tie-ins required on site. Stormwater management facilities will be proposed on site and will be through the south end of the property as that's the natural drainage course over there. So making use of the elevation of the site. As well as we are currently coordinating with third-party utilities, so Hydro One and Enbridge to make sure that when the project is moving forward, if it does, that those items are ready to be relocated as needed. And that is it for the project design section. So any questions on that?
Any questions at this time? Councillor Parks.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure which staff member to direct this question to. When we were talking about the scheduled replacement of some of the equipment in the, more or less in the ice plant area, have those costs, they've been built into this project, but has there been consideration on where that's going to come out of the budget? Because it's already been planned for future work, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out, whether or not those costs would be offset by plans that are already in place for replacement time.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Parks, for the question through the mayor. We're going to talk about this in a moment, but yes, those costs that are required for the facility. We looked at contributions to capital from operating that would be required over the 10-year period of the current capital budget. And those are sort of shown in the report as the $450,000 per year of funding for projects that would be required regardless of whether this project moved forward or not. So when we talk about the budget portion, we're going to be talking about the incremental increase as a result of the project. And so those costs that you're talking about have been considered in that calculation.
Councillor Broderick.
Through you, Your Worship, just one quick question. So in your biased little chart there, sorry. When the life cycle, let's say, we could build this tomorrow, and the life cycle of all the different mechanical and systems, will they all align 30 years down the road where you're replacing everything at once? Or is there sort of different life cycles for each, let's say, the major systems of the project?
Thank you for the question. So through you, Mr. Mayor, no, they won't align all at once. The life cycle for something like a compressor is very different than the life cycle for a brine pump or an ice plant. So it won't be 30 years from now, we've got to do this all over again. It depends on how well they're maintained, if something just happens unexpectedly. But generally speaking, it will be phased.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you very much. Before I start talking about construction phases, schedules and costs, I'd just like to take this opportunity to talk about a safety moment. Safety is at the forefront for us at Chandos with every presentation or meeting we attend. So I'd like to start with a safety moment about the explosion that happened in Kanata this week. There was a construction site where an explosion injured 3 people. Unfortunately, 1 person was seriously injured. So just to take this opportunity that whether we're on site or in our own homes, just to make sure that we store all combustibles away safely, label them correctly and store them in a well-ventilated space, and then have fire extinguishers in accordance with code requirements and so on and so forth. So thanks for that. Okay, for construction phases. So we worked as an IPD team for the last 3 months with all the IPD trade partners, the operations staff, to put together a phasing plan that had the least impact to users. So just to walk you through this, you can see with construction starting in April for all phases, the reason for that is it gives us between now and April to get our design up to speed and procurement of all packages and allow us to get shop drawings done for the long lead items. So phase 1A is our arena pad that's highlighted here in green. We understand that the ice season starts on the 1st of September every year. So we've targeted to get both that level 1B, level 1, which is in phase 1B in yellow on this diagram, and level 2, which is phase 1C, which is the canteen area reception desk. So we'll start with construction in April, and we will be doing the removal of the stairs to the west side of the lower level, infilling that so that we can put the changing rooms below it. And then on the east side of that corridor, we'll also support the floor so we can create an opening to then install our elevator shaft and stairs. With targeted handover of these phases in time for the ice startup in September of 2024. You'll see the pink areas of this pool. This is of this diagram. This is where the existing pool is. We do have an opportunity to get in there before April and do some remediation works and some demolition in anticipation of starting in April. This existing pool will have a concrete slab infill that will support the new changing rooms. And we're looking to get this completed for May in 2025. And then last but not least is the new aquatic facility in our diagram in yellow. Unfortunately, we do have a hydro pole slap bang in the middle of where we want to build a swimming pool. But we did reach out to the utilities company as soon as we started validation. We have a meeting this month with them on site, and they've ensured us that they can really relocate that hydro pole in time for commencement of that in April. Furthermore, we also have a gas line running through that, and we've been in touch with the Gas Utilities Board, and they'll get that removed in time for the start of construction in April. You'll notice in phase 1A for the arena pad and stands, there is another section of work during the off-season of 2025. That is when we will be installing some of the long lead mechanical systems. The current ice can be running on the current system, and then when we put in the new mechanical systems, it'll tie straight into the new systems that we build for this building. Moving on to the next slide. So these are the major milestones. You can see where we are today in November at the end of our validation period. If validation is to be approved, we will do a kickoff meeting on Tuesday next week to start pushing our design to get to 66%. That'll allow us to submit our SPA application and building permits. Furthermore, shop drawings will progress through that and procurement carrying through till August of next year. As mentioned on the previous slide, construction starts in April with completion, building occupancy and substantial completion on Christmas Eve of 2025, leaving us with a couple of months for closeout documents, deficiency corrections, and so on and so forth. So impact to operations. So the library will remain operational throughout. I do have a slide coming up that will show a construction management plan that shows how we keep that operational. As mentioned, the ice arena level 1 and level 2, one of the main core objectives when we onboarded trade partners is that we weren't to interfere with the ice season between September and end of March of every winter. So you can see we're looking for partial occupancy on those two levels, as well as the ice rink in September. And then last but not least, the existing garage will be temporarily closed for structural improvements to the roof during phase 2. That is to support some new equipment going on the roof. But other than that, we do not anticipate any further impacts to operations. For the construction management plan, one of the benefits of the IPD model is we have trade partners on board during design. That doesn't only help with design, but it helps with us planning on site. So you can see from this illustration here, we've cordoned off the site to allow for minimal impact to the recreation center activities. We'll be installing 2 new gates off Amherst Drive. This will prevent construction vehicles going through the parking lots. It will reduce cost of having to redo any access roads into the W.J. Henderson Rec Center, as well as be a safer way for those who use the center to park and walk into the center. Furthermore, we've taken possession of 20 parking spaces there. You'll notice to the left of the parking spaces, we've kept a means of egress from the existing library as to not affect their operations. A laydown area and then site offices will all be away from public accessibility. And as you can see, we will have relocated the gas line and the hydro pole out of the way of our construction operations. Are there any questions with regards to the construction schedule?
Council, any questions at this time? Councillor Budrick.
Through you, sir. Are you building in with your partners possibility of penalties or anything when we're trying to have these windows of where you're trying to shut something down and get something back up again so our residents can use the facilities? Like you've got the one window of phase 1A, 1B, 1C being a short window basically from the spring and summer of 2024. you will have assurances with your trades in that you'll be back up and running so our residents can use the facility come next fall?
Thank you for your question, through you, Mr. Mayor. So, we don't have any penalties in place for this. However, the benefit of having Modern Niagara, who is our mechanical electrical contractor on board, is that we've worked diligently with them with regards to schedule and phasing, and they have ensured us that they can meet the timelines presented today. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Willis.
Through your worship, are there any labor contracts that you're aware of that could put this at risk, or that like something big like cement workers or anything like that that we'd need to be worried about, or electricians?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. We did identify this in our risk register, which I'll talk to shortly in a bit. But with all of the trades we have on board, we've got them to reach out and internally to look at any trade union agreements that are coming up, and that none were foreseen, so it has been removed off the risk register. Thank you for your question.
Any other questions at this time? Being none, please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. So next on to costs. Again, in IPD, we're in a fortunate position where we have trade partners onboarded. Mechanical and electrical are onboarded, as well as pool mechanical. So we've worked through the validation period to have a live forecast estimate. Any decisions that are made in any of the pits that were mentioned earlier, project implementation teams, all get fed back into an estimating pit. So any decision that is made is fed back up to estimating. So we've had a live running total of our construction costs throughout IPD. We've now arrived at a total estimate for construction at $46.4 million. This is a rolled up by division estimate. There is a more detailed estimate in the validation report. And of the $46 million, the partners that we've onboarded, that is Acapulco, Modern Niagara, they account for 46% of that. So we've had direct costing, live costings from them with regards to 46. So this gives a lot of confidence in this number. Additionally to that, we have a further 40% of this budget has been backed by trade numbers. These are trades that work with Chandos. We have good relationships with, lots of projects working with them in the area. So we have coverage for that. So that's how we feel confident about this figure being accurate for the scope of work that's being presented. So to the risk register. So one of the exercises we do at the start of validation is with all of the partners, we do a pre-mortem, which basically try to identify anything that could possibly go wrong on a project. We track that throughout validation. I think we're up to about just under 50 risks identified at the start of validation. As we go through validation, these risks are addressed. We try to mitigate them at that time. However, some of them cannot be completely absolved during validation. So we're down to 33 risks, which I've identified here, which accounts for 6.7% of the construction cost at $3.1 million. This is included in the 46.4 that we presented on the previous slide. The main risks identified, market volatility, escalation. We all saw what happened over the past few years with escalation. So based on data we have of figures from 2017 to 2022, we have a baseline of 3.42%. So we allocated that on the value of the project less the risks identified to come at a figure about $1.5 million. And our risk register also allows for a weighting system that looks at the possibility or likelihood and the impact of any risk and the outcome of it. And so as a team, we feel comfortable that $996,000 will cover us for any market volatility or escalation on the project. Furthermore, bedrock, limestone is very close to the ground for all of us in Kingston. We did have a geotechnical survey done on the project. 8 boreholes did identify bedrock. We have taken into account the bedrock we expect in our validation, that is before the 500,000 that's been allocated here. However, even with the geotechnical report, there's always uncertainty on where that bedrock is and the condition of the shale on top of that bedrock. So we've carried $500,000 in our risk register for that. And then last but not least, scope gaps and interferences. Again, this is not as high as we see typically on other projects because we have trade partners on board. We ran scope gap exercises with our trade partners to make sure that what the pool mechanical believes the mechanical trade is picking up is actually being picked up. So we have that, and that was fully disclosed in the validation report. And then interferences, we're dealing with a existing building here. So as we open up walls, we may discover certain things that cost a little bit more to mediate. So we are carrying $137,000 for that risk item. So the wish list, this is a list of items that can be added back into the project by the clients. If the base target costs trend lower than the $46.4 million that we've illustrated on the validation report, as we get through onboarding more trades, get through more procurement and mitigate a lot of the risks, we may discover that there's an opportunity to introduce some of these items here. You'll see each description comes with a cost and an owner priority. So the first one is the Ninja Cross system at $650,000 that was identified as a lower priority item. Emergency power, the ability to use the W.J. Henderson Rec Center as a relief center was a high priority. We have a cost expected of $150,000 for that. A reading garden, expanded landscape scope, that is a low priority at this stage and is carrying a cost of $232,000. We have allocated in our target costs servicing for some EV parking. However, there is a want for potentially more. So if we start to trend lower on our target cost, we can introduce further EV servicing. Connections for broadcasting at center ice. This would allow the opportunity to broadcast any ice hockey games or anything that's happening on the ice throughout the center. That is coming in at $15,000. A wider Zamboni melt pits at $10,000. There are skylights in the current atrium. However, we would like to see potentially more skylights if the target costs allow for such. So we do have $25,000 allocated as a potential spend for that. In the current estimate, we are doing patch roof repairs where it is required. However, there is the opportunity to have a complete roof repair at $2.4 million. And then the facade that Chris showed earlier illustrated a black metal siding to the extension where the pool will be. If there is an opportunity, we would paint the cladding on the existing building to match. Patching the ceiling above the arena is a high priority at $62,000. Replacing the ceiling above the arena at $376,000. Fixtures in the changing room at $500 per fixture. And then finally, PV over the new building at a range of about $200,000 to $300,000. So those are all wish list items. As we get through procurement, risk mitigation, if the cost comes down, then we will look to the township to add some of these items back into the scope of work. For construction costs, if any questions, please.
Any questions at this time? Councillor Willis.
Through your worship, two questions if I can jump in with it. One is PV. What is PV?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they're solar panels. The actual official PV term is photovoltaic solar panels.
All right, thank you. And what would the benefit be of the wider Zamboni pit? Because it seems like a relatively low cost item, if it makes sense.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, right now when the Zamboni comes in and dumps the ice off, some of it just spills off to the side and doesn't go into the pit. So the operators have to shovel it in. So it's just to make their lives a little bit easier. So we think about $10,000, but you know, again, just every little bit counts at this point.
Councillor Broderick.
Through you, your worship. Again, more for my ignorance, what's the Ninja Cross system?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Ninja Cross system is kind of like an obstacle course that hangs above the pool. Think American Ninja Warrior type thing. So it would add just more programming functions to the building.
Okay, and if I could just one more, partner risk versus risk register. So that's all factored into the budget. Am I oversimplifying by saying, in a perfect world, you don't have to pay any of that and that comes off the final cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is
Okay,
an
thank you.
ideal situation.
Counselor Parks.
Thank you, your worship. A couple of quick questions. Back to the wish list. You had noted that it would come back to the township for a decision. I'm assuming that would comes to council to prioritize that list as to what the recommendation should be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess the question would, or the thought process would be around the value of the wishes item. So suppose we get into a situation where we are $2 million under budget, and can look at these larger items, we could certainly come back to council for direction. But something smaller along the lines of a few extra new fixtures here and there, we might just proceed for the sake of timelines.
Thank you. The other question was in regards to the risk management, or what I call risk management. There have been supply chain issues with getting, especially chillers, boilers, that type of thing. Should that not be built into the risk management, or am I missing that somewhere in those documents? Thank you for that. Back to Councillor Budrick's point about delays and hitting those timelines. If there was a challenge with a supply chain issue that was delaying the project and those completion phases, how would that be dealt with?
So another beauty of the IPD format is that we actually have the trade partners in the room. So we have Acapulco, Modern Niagara, and through Modern and Simcoe as well for equipment. So we've already identified the equipment we want, and we have the lead times for that. And we've built that into our schedule with an allowance for safety in that regard. So we've done our due diligence to make sure that we are ordering the equipment that can be delivered in time.
Counselor Budrick.
Two questions. One, whom through you, sorry, sir, whom on our staff would be, I guess, be the point person to say, okay, these risks are not going to be a problem. There's a cost sharing issue on that. Whom within our staff will be auditing that to make sure that we are getting our 50% back, I guess you could say.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's not the single person on staff that makes the decision. If you think of the contract structure, there is a project management team that has representatives from the different partners that make decisions as a group. So a township representative, which is myself, does sit on that project management team and has a say as to whether or not it is safe to retire a risk.
Okay, no, and that's if it's yourself, I'm fine with that. That's good. The other question, it doesn't have to be tonight, it can be an email. I'd love to know on wish list number 12 how that price is there, because I know that very well. And I'd love, it doesn't have to be tonight, but in the future would be great.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can certainly follow up on that one at a later time.
Yep, no problem.
One thing that jumps out at me is number 8.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So the kind of timeline that we've set for patching is, will this last 10 years? So 10 years is looking at everything, is we don't want to be touching anything big in the building for 10 years from now. So that a full roof repair would take us to 20, 30 years. So that's kind of the balancing act that we're trying to follow here.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay, so moving into the last section of the presentation is around project financials. So this is a bit lengthy, obviously due to the ramifications of it. So as a bit of a background, we'll start by going over total capital costs. The numbers that Mr. Gardner provided were just strictly speaking construction costs, and we need to consider total capital costs when looking at capital costs. Looking at one-time revenues, operating costs and revenues, annual revenues, and then finally we'll close off with the overall projected impact to the tax base. So I'll start us off with total capital costs. So contract costs, construction costs are stated at 46.4, but then we also need to consider things that we'll refer to as soft costs. So the 46.4 is exclusive of taxes. So right off the bat, an automatic $817,000 in HST that is payable by the municipality has to be budgeted for. Same thing for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, things that we need to add to make the building functional. So if we think about it, the contract will kind of have your condo and move-in ready terms, but you still need to bring all the things that go with it. That's what that $1 million covers. $590,000 in staffing, project management fees. Pre-validation costs is everything that was incurred prior to the validation phase starting in August. And then permitting, we budgeted for $100,000. So there is a recommendation for an exemption to the building bylaw, looking to or requesting that costs incurred by the building division to inspect the facility be charged, but not the regular fees. So that is permitted in the Building Act or the Building Code Act. So we are just requesting that that exemption be put forward. And then lastly, contingency on soft costs. So there's a little bit less certainty around these estimates that we're putting forward. So just putting a bit of a number there to make sure that we're covering off anything that might be that we might have missed. So that would take us to a total of $49,500,000. And I'll turn it over to Director Campbell to talk about one-time revenues as well.
Thank you. Okay, so in terms of the capital costs, so the capital costs are detailed in the blue, and then the revenues are detailed in the orange and yellow. So there are a number of items that have been secured to reduce the impact of the capital cost as projected. So grants and fundraising total $20 million. So we have the $16.5 million from the Green and Inclusive Community Building Fund from the federal government. There's $86,000 for Enabling Accessibility Fund, a to be confirmed amount of 1.25 million for the forgivable portion of the Green Municipal Fund for which we've applied, and $670,000 from the Renewable Energy Benefit Fund. Then we also have the partnership with the city that was detailed by Ms. Lamb earlier, listed there. And then the next dark yellow portion of the chart is the general capital reserve contributions. So this includes 1.72 million that's allocated within that general capital reserve to the community hub project, as well as
the $200,000 in the emergency pool reserve. So for this project, various amounts have been set aside since 2016 into the general capital reserve. Most recently for the capital contribution to the project and the emergency pool fund, about $300,000 per year. The next piece is the light yellow, which is the development charges projection. So that's 12.2 million, which is made up of a couple of items. So the first is the current period within the current development charges background study, which totals $2.4 million. So these are charges that are projected to be to be collected within the period of the existing development charges study between now and 2030. And they're based on the current level of service in the Parks and Recreation area. And then there's $9.8 million in projected post-period development charges to be collected. So these would be collected in the later years of the project and would be based on phased-in increased levels of service in the Parks and Recreation area as a result of both this project and other changes to levels of service within Parks and Recreation, as well as they would be based on future growth projections. Sorry, there was something else I wanted to say there that has escaped me. I apologize. So that leaves a funding gap. Within the grants and fundraising portion, I did not speak about the community fundraising that's proposed. So there's a $900,000 community fundraising target that is part of that lower dark orange portion as well. And this target is based on research about the fundraising revenues that have been raised by similar communities undertaking similar projects. So if the resolution to establish a fundraising committee is approved, staff will return to council at a later date for council to consider terms of reference for a community fundraising committee. And that later date would be not too far in the future. There's also a proposal for an unused portion of the Renewable Energy Benefit Fund to be used. Following the publishing of the report, it was determined that some of the approved grants through the regular process hadn't been transferred yet, so that amount actually would be $860,000 rather than the 1.135 million that was proposed in the report. This would be only the unspent portion of the Renewable Energy Benefit Fund, not the other portions of the fund. Also wanted to apologize for the wording of the resolution. So if this went forward, the correct process for these monies under the renewable energy grant process is that council would approve the submission of an application by the township to the next intake for consideration by the committee. And then that would come back to council, or the committee's recommendation would come back to council. Another option would be to exclude these funds from the business plan moving forward. And as would apply if any other funding opportunities do not come to fruition, this difference would be made up through a combination of project cost savings, fundraising grants, and or tax increases. So I just wanted to note that the information contained within the business case was developed to paint a picture for council of the potential impacts to the general tax rate of this proposed project. This is the best information we have at this time, and it details the incremental increase to required tax revenues as a result of the project moving forward. All operational costs that are discussed through the report are for illustrative purposes and would only be ultimately approved through subsequent year operating budgets. So we're not asking for any operating approvals to operating budget spending at this time. Those numbers were provided to paint that picture for council. So we did this to allow council to determine the best course forward, specifically whether to accept validation and grant pre-budget approval for the capital costs associated with the project only. So the $8.5 million funding gap that is remaining there, the white section of the chart, So that is what would need to be debt serviced by the general rate. And over a 30-year period at the current Infrastructure Ontario lending rate of 5.33%, this results in an annual payment of approximately $570,000. So, okay, so sorry. I see why you're pointing at me. Okay, my apologies. So as noted on the previous slide, the approximate loan repayment is estimated to be $570,000 thereabouts. Then we have sorry, Ms. Lamb, I apologize. Ms. Lamb is going to discuss some of the operating expenses, and then I will discuss the remaining portions of the business case.
Thank you, Director Campbell. So in discussing operating expenses, we'll start with staffing. Keeping in mind it is, we're working towards a year-round facility that's going to be operational anywhere from 12 to 18 hours per day. We're looking at an expanded facility, increased programming, and keeping in mind that we are looking at a facility that has legislative requirements. There's industry standards related to its operation, things like TSSA requirements, safe work practices that we must follow. It certainly results in operational structures that we have to follow and are required, which has resulted, as you've seen in the business plan, in additional resources. This includes additional facility staff related to operation of the facility, in addition to staffing related to the delivery of programming and servicing of customers and residents. So what we're looking at is in 2019, there was approximately 1.46 million in staffing. In 2026, we're looking at approximately 2.24 million. So an increase of about 780,000. So the impact is really around the difference of how we're operating the facility from open to close, and the difference in the not just running an arena with a 5-lane pool. It's how we're running that mechanical, how we're servicing the customer, how are we going between operating in a rink and servicing that arena, the arena customer, but also running an 8-lane, 25-meter pool, leisure pool, with having those customers coming and going from the facility, ensuring we're doing that in a safe manner, while also operating and being able to do those checks, and then having the proper programming staff, being able to meet ratios as it relates to pool regulations and things of that sort. So that's where the staffing components come from. We're also looking at things like energy costs. So we're looking at, again, an expanded footprint and programming, which will impact energy costs, electrification of mechanical systems to meet sustainability goals. It's also resulting in higher than historical averages. However, over time, we are going to see savings. We're also then looking at insurance, property taxes, supplies and equipment, contracted services, advertising, capital costs, water and sewer. So considering this considers decrease due to inclusion of capital investment included in the project. We're also considers realignment of the division. In 2019, we did see some restructuring, but we've also seen restructuring on how we're budgeting. So advertising, for instance, we've done some shifting on how we're advertising within the division since 2019, but we're also expecting to see increased advertising needs and marketing needs within the division between 2019 and into 2026. So all of that is being considered within that budget in front of you. So moving into operating revenues, you know, from an arena perspective, ICE, we expect to stay stable year over year with ICE. Our rates are among some of the top in the area. We've looked at the rate structure. We will continue to maximize ICE usage where we can, both from a township programming perspective as well as rentals. Where we look for opportunity to drive more revenue and to find more opportunities to maximize usage is in the floor season, as I mentioned earlier. So through programming and rental opportunities and special events. We've had to look at calculations though and determine in 2026 what is the opportunity and where are we going to actually land with capacity. So we have been conservative. We feel we're probably going to be about a 25% capacity or usage, I should say, in year one. And how will that then increase year over year based on our efforts to find new customer groups and drive new programming. As it relates to aquatics, the ability to do that split programming revenue opportunities is going to be key for us. In-demand programming such as swimming lessons, we know we will be able to fill, and that is reflective in the revenues in front of you. Things like Aquafit and the smaller, younger children, we know those programs will fill. What we're looking at is how do we maximize the pool revenues with the new experience that people are going to have, and that's something that is shown in the revenues that are in front of you. The other facility revenues, such as the multipurpose room, those are going to be some new opportunities for us as well. We've also looked at additional revenue opportunities, everything from facility advertising, the canteen lease, sales of goggles, swim caps, swim diapers, all of those types of things. So those are all considered in the numbers that are in the business plan. A couple of new fees that need to be considered. One is in the business plan as consideration. The other one is not as of yet, but both staff will be bringing forward to council in the spring with a new miscellaneous fee structure for council's consideration. The first one is non-resident fees. That is not considered in the business plan in front of you. It's not something that the township currently charges. It is something that within the recreation industry, a lot of municipalities will charge it because recreation is subsidized by tax rate. And if non-residents are using your services, should it be subsidized by your taxpayers? So that is something that township staff will be doing some research and will be coming forward to you in the spring with the miscellaneous fees to provide you with some information so you can make some educated decisions. The second is a capital improvement fee. And right now what we charge is a Zamboni surcharge. We're not charging a capital improvement fee. We're trying to recover some capital fees to contribute to future capital improvements on all of our infrastructure. So what we have included in all of these revenues is a 5% capital improvement fee on all rentals. That is reflective in here, but that will be coming forward. We do not charge that today, though. That is something that is being considered as of 2026 within this plan. And I believe pass that over.
Okay, so the next portion as detailed in the presentation just previously by Ms. Lamb. So we have a net increase of $780,000 per year expected in staffing and a net increase in energy costs projected at $100,000 a year, coupled with a reduction in general expenses of about $97,000 and an increase in revenues of about $444,000. And so we also have existing annual revenues that can continue to be contributed from operating to contribute to the project. So staff are proposing to maintain the contribution to capital from operating that has been in place for the project for the last number of years in the amount of $250,000. So this is the contribution I detailed previously that's been going into the General Capital Reserve Fund. And then further to Councillor Park's question previously, the $4.5 million in capital works for the facility that would have been funded regardless of the project is listed as the other portion on this chart of the $450,000 a year over the next 10 years. So we've shown those contributions as well. So continuing to build on this chart, those two items have been added, which results in the net annual incremental cost of approximately $207,000 a year, which represents approximately 1.06% on the current tax levy.
So with that, I think we can turn over to you, Mr. Mayor, for any questions on this section of the presentation.
Council. Any questions? Counselor Bluder.
One quick little bit of help through you, sir. So the one-time revenues, they're talking about development charges from 2022 to 2030 at 2.3 million, and then post period after 2030. That's about 25-ish years with inflation thrown in as an estimate that we would still have to finance somehow along the way until we get that money. If you could help me explain that, that'd help me out.
Thanks for the question through the mayor. So any debt servicing costs that are associated with development charges are carried through the development charges themselves.
Counselor Ennis.
Thank you. And through the mayor, and just staying on the one-time revenues for a minute, the reserves and the 1.9 on the slide, but and the bulk of that is the capital reserve fund, I think of the 1.7 million. And so I think, as you mentioned, I think that the township was making contributions to that capital reserve fund for the community hub project since 2016. And I'm wondering, all right, thinking, is the premise of that reserve fund for the entire hub at the time when the reserve was started? So for both phase 1 and phase 2. Well, I guess that's the question. Was it for both phase 1 and phase 2?
Through the mayor, when that money was initially started to be put aside, yes, it was for the whole project and looking at the potential to be moving the municipal office to that site as well.
And just to follow up, so if council felt it was prudent to keep some of that reserve in reserve for the potential, gym or walking track, the phase 2 parts of it, then that number would change the numbers.
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Any other questions? Counselor Parks.
Thank you, Your Worship. We touched on earlier that there is a $200,000 emergency pool repair fund that is in the operating.
That's sitting currently in the general capital reserve as an allocation to that sub project.
Can that be applied to the operating expenses to reduce that shortfall?
So the plan,
Like the difference of the 206 you were showing on that
So the-
on that last screen.
yeah, so
Of your
through the
operating
mayor, that $200,000 in the emergency pool reserve makes up the remainder of the can you just go back to sorry, makes up the remainder of the reserves portion on this current slide.
Okay.
So the 1.9 million is made up of the 1.7 million from the project
Okay.
portion of that reserve, and the other 200,000 is the emergency pool fund.
Thank you. I just wasn't sure where that was allotted. Another question for the director, if I could. When you talked about using future growth projections, and I know this is kind of a touchy subject, but the impact reassessment that keeps being promised that doesn't happen, is that calculated into those projections?
So I'm going to answer, and our interim treasurer can correct me if I get this wrong. So any reassessment by MPAC would be figured into those projections. But so would any growth that occurs over the coming years. So and any reassessment would take, the current assessment is based on the 2016 numbers, and any reassessment would township wide reassess the values to whatever year is chosen. And so you wouldn't end up with you likely wouldn't end up with large everybody would move together sort of through the reassessment. So even current growth that's coming online is being assessed at that 2016 assessed value. So sort of talking myself in circles, I apologize. But so yes, it would be considered in future growth projections, but so would any growth that is occurring. But one thing I would like to note is that for development charges specifically, industrial development does not contribute to the Parks and Recreation component of the development charges.
This is for Ms. Lamb. Would it be accurate to say that on your staffing projections and the costs, because you're looking at the 2019 values, and we know that, you know, for minimum wage, that there's been some substantial incremental increases. Would that gap of the $700,000 actually be less if we had continued to operate the pool for 2021, 22?
That through you, Mr. Mayor, that could be true. We have taken into consideration today's rate plus inflation till 2026. But with COVID in the middle of that and minimum wage differences, it's not 100% accurate. Yeah, there have been assumptions made. Yeah.
Councillor Wallace.
Through your worship, you mentioned a lease for the canteen for the food services, and we've got 105,000 of capital in the budget. Is that space going to be completely finished for a tenant, or is that just the walk-in fridges and they bring the rest of the equipment?
Answer. You do want to answer? Through you, Mr. Mayor, the space will be equipped with the large equipment. Any small type equipment would be the responsibility of the canteen operator.
It's my favorite topic. Still on food services. There was mention that we stopped providing vending services in the building at some point in time. Is there a reason for that? Because with a much busier building, vending provides an opportunity for revenue.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was done through COVID, through touch points and through serviceability. There was a struggle with, I'll say, contracted services and finding a vendor to come in to actually do that. My experience has been that when you operate with a canteen operator, it's more effective to have your canteen operator actually take on that service and include that in consideration for that, them having that service, and that would then be recovered through that revenue stream.
So there will be vending machines in the building.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, if that is something that council wants to consider, then we could certainly consider that through when we look at RFPing that service. But that's not considered in today's scope. It's something that we could consider if that's what the wish is.
So that would impact electrical and things like that and having spaces for those machines. So is that something we would look at sooner rather than later?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is something we should look at sooner rather than later. Just as feedback from staff, the challenge with vending machines is when a canteen operator isn't around and something goes wrong with the machines, the challenge comes back to staff on how we're servicing them and what that looks like in terms of recovering funds from those machines and damage. So that is a discussion that would need to be had in terms of where, what, how.
Sorry. Thank you for acknowledging that it's not necessarily required to take money out of the renewable energy funds, because I personally don't agree that that's the right source for this. Mr. Leslie brought out that there's no provincial money in this project yet. Do we know of a funding stream that's available to us that we could be tapping into? And also, are there partnerships? I know that previous councils talked about partnering with the YWCA. Are there partnerships that we could be bringing in that could also bring funding?
Through the mayor, I will answer maybe the first part and I'll pass it across to Ms. Lamb for the second part. But we're always having an eye to all funding programs that are available. And certainly if anything comes up, whether it's provincial, federal, or otherwise, we will certainly make application to any project to any program that this project could apply to.
Thank you. We certainly do have partners that we're constantly working with for delivery of programs. So, for instance, we do have BGC that we currently deliver daytime camp programming through. So summer camps, and PD day camps and the whatnot. That delivery of programming is in delivery of programming though, not in terms of operational facility. So if I could ask for clarity, is the question related to delivery of programming or is the question related to operation of facility?
This dates back 2 councils ago, but I remember that Councillor at the time, Dana Lunas from Bath, had attended a conference where he had seen a model where the Y was doing capital partnerships with communities to build pools and be involved in programming. And I just wondered if that was ever something we considered.
Through your worship, my experience has been, and certainly in conversations with YMCAs will come into your community and it's usually they come in and they take the facility and there's a fee for service and a contract in place and they operate your facility and the municipality is responsible for the facility and the cost. And the municipality does not operate the facility and does not operate the programming. The YMCA is 100% taking on that facility. So that would be a completely different model of operation, completely separate from what we've presented this evening.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you, your worship. Through you, I've got a few questions. Can I get clarification on the 12 million thereabouts dollars in development charges? So is recreation allotted a percentage of development charges? And if so, can you give me sort of a ballpark of that, somebody?
Through the mayor. So yes, recreation is allotted. It's based on the background study. I don't have, well, I have some numbers in front of me, but not the exact percentage. That's certainly something we can look up for you and pass along.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it just because when I see 12 million, I want to make sure, like, a few dollars anyways. And maybe I could direct this, I guess, to Ms. Lamb. Staffing complement increase. So we saw the dollar amount. I'm thinking now full-time equivalent of jobs, pool, arena, and programming. Like, can you give us an idea? Is that an increase of a position wise? You did make some references sort of to health and safety and different legislation, but do you have a number of bodies maybe that would put in the building?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, from a facility operations perspective, so the staff that actually will be taking care of the actual operation and structure of the facility, making sure, plant checks are done and custodial and clearing the ice and checking mechanical and chemical tests and things of that sort. That's what we call our facility operational team. We'd be looking at 3 additional full-time positions. And this is based on how we're looking today. We have to refine this plan and look at what is going to happen as we move forward. This is our best, plan looking at it today. It is a team of 4 today, and of that team of 4 today, 3 of them in the summer move into parks. So we would be looking at 3 additional to move to a full complement of 7 to be able to open that facility and close that facility based on a 16 to 18-hour day, 7 days a week, 360 days a year. With that impact of going year round, we now have a shortage in the summer season. So we'd be looking at additional contract staff in the summer seasons and in the parks team. So we'd be looking at laborers in the park. In the aquatics team, we currently only have 1 full-time team, 1 full-time staff person. If we were still running that 5-lane 25-meter pool, we would still only have 1 full-time staff person. So we'd be adding a second full-time programmer to that team. And then we would be looking at what is the best way. We know there's challenges in attracting and retaining aquatic staff in the industry. So what is the best way for us to hire and retain and staff that pool? We'd be looking at how do we hire most likely two full-time guard instructors for daytime shifts in the pool. And then we would backfill and fill the remainder of all those shifts with part-time casual staff with guards and instructors. So that would be the rest would be all part-time, a complement.
Okay, and just maybe clarify, so the 800,000, I think is the number, that includes an addition of those three or?
Though that includes those positions as well as then the difference between those 2019 to 2026.
Okay, thank you. And if I may continue, just talked about
If you don't mind, I believe the director had.
oh, sorry.
Sorry, just apologies through the mayor. I do have the answer to your development charges question. So, for the residential development charges, approximately 37% of what's paid is allocated to Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, maybe I could continue on that line. Just then is that a township set thing or is that a legislative piece, or do you know?
It's through the mayor. It is based on legislation. It is a framework that is set out by legislation that is then the township has its own specific study where the development charges are calculated for specifically for the township.
Okay, thank you. If I could continue then. And I don't have the terminology you exactly use, but basically the old Zamboni fee. So is that going to become a across the board ball diamond rentals, everything?
Ideally, that is what staff would propose. And we can bring that model back in, most likely going to be around April when we bring the miscellaneous fees Schedule F back to council for review and consideration and what that would look like. And ideally, the CIF is what we would call it, capital improvement fees. So if you're collecting 5% off of a rental of a ball diamond, that 5% would then go into a reserve account. So when we're doing capital work back on those sports fields, it's drawn from that reserve account.
Okay, and just this is more of a statement than a question, but I'd be interested to know if there's any institutional knowledge of the last fundraising. I'm looking over at the soon to retire fire chief, whether there's somebody that has, because I believe the last fundraising was for the library, the capital, but it'd be interesting because I know there's a bunch of names on there, and I went through it the other day. Unfortunately, not many of those names are around anymore, but it would be a challenge to see what kind of history there is there.
The chief thanks you. Are there any further questions at this time? Councillor Ennis.
Thank you. And through the mayor, if we just jump back to the staffing costs and the incremental number, I believe it's the 780,000. On page 100 of the report, offset against that is a savings of 289 in administrative staff costs. Could you just explain what that savings is?
Through your worship, my recollection and based on the history that I've been able to do and not being here through this time is my understanding is that in 2019 there was restructuring that was done within the division and different restructuring on how the directors roll and down and through management and different positions on how they were reporting and allocations. So that is strictly related to that restructuring and how things happened and how things were changed in 2019 within the division and the department.
And so that sounds like a one-time restructuring of administrative staff, and then resulting in this 289,000 savings. But that savings is then applied to each of the 30 years of the required annual debt cost to lower the annual debt cost amount, the 188,000 or 1%.
I'll give it a shot. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's where the pot of money is coming from. So, the positions that were affected by the restructuring were initially only funded from that 710 department code, whereas now the same number of people are still in the organization, but the funding for those positions comes from different pots of money, if that makes sense, that aren't specific to recreation. So it's not a one-time saving, as if you compare the operating budget for staffing and recreation right now, like even today for the 2023 budget, it is $286,000 cheaper than it was in 2019. So that's why it's an annual savings, not just a one-time thing.
And just another follow-up. So, it's the 289,000 I understand as a savings to the recreation cost center. But those people presumably remained within the organization. And so it's not, or those positions, that funding remained within the organization. So I'm just wondering about characterizing that savings and applying it to the overall organization number of the $188,000 per year, the 1%, that would need to increase the tax rate to fund. Because unless that savings is actually available somewhere in the organization, or maybe that's the question, is it?
Sorry, through the mayor, I don't know that anyone here has that answer right now. Apologies.
Through the mayor, and this is with regards to general costs. If we could jump to that one, sorry. And it's sort of along the same lines in that, there's a $96,000 savings, incremental savings that we're referencing for general costs, right? To get to that number, there's a $246,000 capital cost savings. So could you explain what that capital cost savings represents? It's on page 102 of the report, and it's feeding into the $96,000 savings, overall savings from general costs. And to get to that 96, there's a subtraction of 286,000 or 246,000 for capital costs between 2019 and 2026. Just what does that 246,000 capital cost savings represent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we did look into this today. And from what I can tell, and based on not being here, there was budgeted dollar values in 3 different departments, and there was monthly for capital costs, and there was monthly then expenses associated to it to equal these dollar values. I would have to have I'd like to have additional consultation with our interim treasurer regarding it, because they're actually exact amounts. So I don't want to speculate and give you an answer that isn't. I don't want to speculate if that's a fair answer. But to be fair, that only happened in 2019. Though that accounting practice didn't continue in 2020 and on. It only happened in 2019, where it's budgeted in those 3 departments, and the exact same value is then expensed for that expense budget. and then actual happened, like expense line, actual line.
Just to follow up. And maybe we could follow up with some information on that, but it's along the same lines of, it seems like that was, a one-time capital expenditure, maintenance costs in the building, done in 2019. And so we're saying, well, we won't need to do that in 2026. So that's zero. That's why it's the 246 savings. I'm just wondering if it's one time, should it be applied to all the 30 years of the annual debt service cost to get to that kind of final 188 number? But we can perhaps follow up on that.
Okay, any other questions at this time from council? Oh, you have another one? Councilor Ennis.
Thanks, and through the mayor. Just on the ongoing revenues from reserve fund transfers. So we talked a little bit about there's this reserve fund of the 1.7, 1.9 should that be used. There's also in the one-time or the ongoing, the idea that there was a yearly contribution of 250,000 for this project to the reserve fund, and that could be perhaps transferred over to address some of the annual operational costs. So similar question to the reserve. When we were setting aside that 250,000 each year for this project, is the idea that part of that was perhaps for phase 2, and not just all for phase 1 at the time when it started in 2016 or whatever it was?
Through the mayor, possibly, I don't know. I think I don't know that it was specifically outlined in the specific reasoning. It was, we're going to start setting aside 250,000. Well, it wasn't $250,000 originally, but the original amounts were lower, and then it increased over time to go toward the community hub project, and whether that was intended to be spent on phase 1 or phase 2, or how that would be divvied up. I'm not aware of that division ever being explicitly talked about, unless anyone else is. So
yeah, I think just and perhaps it's more of a comment, but we've been setting aside 250,000 each year in reserves for this project, and perhaps it's prudent for council to consider continuing to set aside some amount. Maybe it's not the full 250, or maybe it's a portion of it, for to use some of that to continue to set aside for phase 2.
oh, thank you. Sorry. That certainly can be reflected in the 2024 budget and ongoing budgets, if council wishes to see that moving forward.
Any other questions at this time? Deputy Mayor Talbot.
So a bit of a theoretical question. If council were to establish a policy for allocation of new industrial assessment that we obviously all anticipate coming online, notwithstanding, of course, that we do not have any numbers really for what those exact assessment numbers are or would be at present. In theory, or in principle, could ratepayers reasonably expect that that serious revenues could potentially be applied to relieve the burden on the general rate for the debt service of this project within the near future?
Through the mayor, in theory, yes, that would be up to council to determine what to do with those revenues, and what you've proposed in theory could be something that could be done.
if I could just follow up on that question, that would be a policy decision then that would be coming to council, or council would request a policy to be updated to include that. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, I mean, traditionally, those sorts of policy decisions are made through the budget process, but if council wished to have a separate policy specific to the theoretical discussion that we're having, then that would be a possibility, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, through the budget system as well. Correct. Okay. Any other, Councillor Ennis?
Thank you, and through the mayor. Just thinking about the sort of the 550,000 annual debt service cost to, which is sort of as, I think of as the cost to buy the building, is $550,000 per year, and that's for the whole building. In one of the questions we asked of staff in the lead up to this, one was, what's the operational subsidy required to then operate the pool in the future? And when you add up the staffing costs and the energy and general costs, and you subtract any revenues, and I believe the number was the annual subsidy required for aquatics is almost $900,000. So am I looking at the numbers correctly, that to buy the building, it's the whole building, so the pool, the arena, and the fix up to the common areas, it's going to cost us $550,000 a year, and then to operate the pool, the subsidy required annually from taxpayers is approximately $900,000.
I can maybe speak to the first part of it. So the cost to buy the building being about 500,000 is accurate, but that's to buy the building as a whole, right? So then drawing a comparison of aquatic specifically is a little bit trickier, because now we're just talking about a portion of the building. So just in that sense, it's a bit of a hard comparison to draw. And then I might turn it over to someone else to talk about the next part.
And in similarities, it's very difficult to separate the two, because running just the aquatic portion of the facility, we don't operate it as individual units. The staff are shared throughout the facility. So I think, in fairness to the numbers that were provided in that scenario, our recreation, for instance, our recreation attendants, they're operating the entire facility, so they're allocated across several units. So if we were just running just the aquatic facility, they would be required to run that facility no matter what. So that number is a bit variable in that they're being pulled. The best way to describe this, they would, if they're running just an aquatic facility, they would still be needed. But if they're running a multiple amenity facility, they're being spread across they're being spread and have multiple duties. Does that make sense?
Just sort of following, I guess, sort of a comment. I think it would be a good idea to have a view of that operational number, to a question from the deputy earlier about discussions with the city of Kingston and the 25% capital versus operations. Having a view of that number would be important to those potential discussions.
Okay, any other questions from council? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Goodrick, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Okay. Please proceed then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to close it off as a quick summary here, the proposed project as designed really will provide expanded programming to residents of Loyalist Townships and residents of surrounding municipalities as well. It is a key project in meeting the township's climate action goals. and will result in a facility that's more accessible to anyone in Loyalist Township and will remove some barriers to participation that are otherwise felt today. There are certain opportunities associated with proceeding with the project today or sooner rather than later. So most specifically, the requirements of the GICB grant that does provide $16.5 million in funding towards the project do require the facility to be complete by the spring of 2026. So we are able to meet those timelines, but there's, with a substantial completion of Christmas Eve 2025, the buffer is quite small. And then also proceeding sooner rather than later will mitigate potential costs associated with escalation, and costs or concerns around supply chain delays and all those other things that have been brought up by various members of council tonight. So just a few things to keep in mind here. Based on the high level numbers that have been provided today, the projected impacts to the general tax rate is 1.06% to both build and operate the expanded facility for the foreseeable future. So that leads us to a number of resolutions that were included in the reports, which I won't go through right now, but they are up on the screen for your reference. And with that, I think that'll be the end of the presentation from our end.
Thank you to the entire team for the presentation. Council? Do we need a break or are we good to keep on rolling? 2-minute break? Okay, let's just take a break. We'll be back at 8:50 to continue. Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting and keep pushing forward. So council, we've had the presentation, we've asked the questions and dropped a couple comments. Typically the next is to move to the recommendation. Is everyone good with doing that, or are there any further questions at this time? Being none, I'll read the recommendation like I normally do, and then I'll look for a motion for something to be put on the table. So the recommendation on the report is that the report from the Engineering and Environment Division, November 9th, 2023, read W.J. Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Validation Report be received, and that the validation report for the W.J. Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Project be accepted. Number 2, that pre-budget approval for the project's capital costs in the amount of 49.5 million, full amount, be approved as part of the 2024 and 2025 capital budgets. Item 3, the township staff be authorized to apply to any grants which may provide additional funding to the W.J. Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Project. Number 4, the township staff be authorized to negotiate the terms of an agreement with the City of Kingston, which will see the City of Kingston contribute $6.55 million to be funded equally in 2024, 25, and 26 towards the capital cost of the aquatic component of the project, subject to the City of Kingston residents having equal access to aquatic programming for a period of 20 years. 5, that the CAO and mayor be authorized to execute a partnership agreement with the City of Kingston once satisfactory terms have been agreed upon. 6, that a community fundraising committee be established on terms of reference approved by council, and that a fundraising target of $900,000 be established for the project. The council authorize an exemption from the township's building bylaw so that only direct costs incurred by the building division be part of the project, be charged in lieu of full permitting fees as permitted by the Building Code Act. 8, that the next development charges background study include updating impacts such as project costs, growth share, and the levels of service to determine the calculated development charges for current and post period. And 9, that the Renewable Energy Benefit Fund surplus accumulated between 2021 and 2023 in the amount of $1,135,908 be allocated to the project. So with that, council, do we have a motion we wish to put on the floor? Deputy Mayor Town.
Through you, your worship, I would move to receive the report and adopt recommendations 1 through 8. And with respect to recommendation number 4, that the following wording be added. So where the current recommendation ends for a period of 20 years, that it would be added as well as negotiate contribution by the City of Kingston to ongoing operating costs over the same period of the agreement.
We have a second. Comments?
So I'll speak to the obvious omission of recommendation number 9. I do think at this juncture, those funds should ideally be separate from this project for fear of causing division where we want unity. We want the entire township behind this project, and obviously there are a lot of public sensitivities, particularly in certain wards, with respect to the Renewable Energy Benefit Fund. I'm grateful to Director Campbell, who referenced this earlier with respect to what was the final number? It was 860. With regard to finding that 860 by other means. Obviously, all of this is coming through the budget process. So, whatever, fundraising, restraint measures, surpluses, reserves, whatever else can potentially avoid having to use those renewable energy funds would be ideal. But potentially an application could be revisited at a later time, but certainly at this juncture, it would be ideal if that fund was not part of this.
Thank you. Seconder, you have comments?
I would certainly take the deputy's words of wisdom in that we're trying to, build a culture of the whole township, and anytime we can maybe prevent some, I guess, hostility or negativity or however you want to word it, it certainly could be, it's advantageous. And I think that staff have more than done their fair share of taking questions from us and from the community, and should be commended for that. But I know it's not easy sometimes to get caught with something. And we all think, we think in our silos, to put it that way. So I support the amendment as the deputy has proposed it.
Thank you. Other comments from council? Councilor Park.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is appropriate to ask staff, but the $860,000 vibrancy fund being removed from that, what does that translate to another percentage on increase in taxes?
Through the mayor, it would represent movement from calculated required increase of 1.06% to 1.35%.
Councilor Ennis.
Thank you, and through the mayor. I'll just try and suggest one friendly amendment just to number 5, and striking that, as I think this City of Kingston agreement is of the magnitude and importance to this project and the township, that I would like, as a member of council, have to lay eyes on, at least perhaps not the final agreement, but perhaps an agreement in principle prior to a final agreement.
So if I can clarify, you'd just like to see you'd like to have the agreement come back to council before the signatures went on it. And so you can just include the wording in that motion, section 5 then. Did you have any further comments, Councilor Ennis? Okay. Yes, question for clarification.
So to the director, as a follow-up to Councillor Parks's question, that potential additional increase to the levy requirement of that 860,000 would be if we were unable to find additional sources of revenue, correct?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct.
Councilor Parks.
Thank you. I would just maybe suggest a friendly amendment to item number 9 to indicate that if that additional source of income or funding wasn't available, that we could consider that. I just don't want it completely off the table.
Yes, yeah, I think so, and I mean I think it needs to be said here too that staff are doing their due diligence in bringing to council's attention every possible available option that there is to council. And so yeah, I think it would be, yeah, of course, if there can't be additional cost savings found to make up for that 860,000, that following due process and applying to the funds through the committees, would be possible.
So you're proposing a friendly amendment that number 9 would be revisited if the savings can't be achieved and follow the steps of the policy.
The due process. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Counselor Willis.
I'm just wondering if that is necessary in this resolution, because it's always an option for staff to apply through the Renewable Energy Benefit Fund using the due process. So I'm just wondering why we have to include it in this.
Do you like to clarify?
Yes, thank you. Because it came as a recommendation from staff, I think it needs to be included. I won't support the motion if it's not.
Okay. So proposed friendly amendment. Mover. Is it friendly? Okay.
Make a suggestion. Something just to say, if no other viable source of revenue or funding was available, the vibrancy funding could be considered. Something like that.
Friendly? Okay. I'm just going to make sure that we get this on the floor. Is it a question for clarification on this item? Okay, we'll take care of this friendly first though, and then we'll go to the next. Otherwise, we'll get mixed up. Okay. Yeah, it would end up coming back to council, or it would be a budget item, I think. Am I correct? Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we've got friendly, seconder. Is it considered friendly? Okay. Other questions, comments at this time from council? Regarding the motions and with amendments on the floor, and we're good. I'm just going to look at staff. There's been a few changes to the recommendation. Are we clear? I know it's recorded, so we have the recording for the minutes, as long as everyone is good with the changes. I'm just, and Councillor Ennis, you brought forward a friendly amendment.
Just the friendly on that the agreement or agreement in principle with the city king comes back to council for a look.
Is that considered friendly? Seconder? Okay. So that's added as well then. Okay. Any other statements this evening? Councillor Project. I'm being a little relaxed because I want to make sure that everyone is good with the motion that we're going to bring.
You look very relaxed, your worship.
Not even a jack.
No, I wanted to make a statement, and forgive me if it sounds in a sense political, but I guess we're politicians. And I wrote this out so I wouldn't be rambling. So here we go. I ran for council in 2018 and was not successful, ran again last time. And in my campaign, talking to the people, I supported the concept of a community hub. And I think the project tonight is an exciting opportunity for the future of Loyalist. Being a 45+ year resident of Ernestown and Loyalist, I've watched the community grow tremendously and watched a lot of change, the development of the rink, the development of the pool, the development of the library. And, I've had an opportunity over the last 15 or so years to travel throughout Ontario, seeing a lot of arena complexes, recreation, etc. And I 100% can say that the one we have at present, when the pool is operational, is one of the best you'll see anywhere. And when hockey teams would come in, they would say the same thing. Previous council supported the development of the community center through its various stages, support of community groups, whether it be the Lions Club or individuals, etc. You can see that outside the library with the names there. Programming provides what we need through the various stages of life. Some of us are at one end of it and some are at the other. And as our population grows, the population is going to expect the services. Another commitment I made, and I talked to people, and I think it's no surprises, to try and keep our infrastructure up to date. This is badly needed in the community. This pool situation, it's festered way too long, and we need to deal with it now and not kick it down the road. The arena upgrades, we're going to pay them at some point. North Frontenac lost an entire year of hockey in their community because they had a problem with their ice plant. From an environmental standpoint, this is great. You know, it's not a big thing to some, but you know, climate action plan, 35% decrease in natural gas, 95% in greenhouse gases. You know, that's huge. And even for a small township, it sends a message to people that choose this place. And my hope is down the road, we do get to a net zero. That would be a great goal. You know, whether it's solar technologies, whatever, we can be one of those places instead of the earlier presentations where you're showing places, maybe we'll be on that list instead of Calgary and a lot of places out west, I noticed. The one thing that I remember, one of our fellow candidates that ran in Ward 3, accessibility. You know, the barrier free viewing, fully accessible change room, handrails. Not many in this room were there the one day I witnessed a man who basically died 24 hours after falling down the stairs because of lack of handrails. Elevator, bring it all up to code. You know, I'll put it in sort of this terms. The people at the foresight to build our buildings are now the people that need our support to get in those buildings, whether it's an elevator or a handrail, however you want to sort of frame it. I'm still on that. I want that platform at some point in the rink because I think that's very important for accessibility. Kudos to staff. This has been totally open. I can't believe that you hear people saying, well, we didn't know about it. Like, it's been everywhere. It's been on the website, print media, social media, utility inserts. The fact that 7,950 township residents got a mailer, you know, it's there. The open house focus groups with Ernstown Secondary. I'd ask Rami if he could pull some data of that, but probably not possible. But those are the people who are going to live here down the road. You know, we see comments, and a lot of times it's the keyboard warrior comment type thing. The finances, and I can appreciate everybody's concerned with the finances, but I think I look at it this way. Yeah, it might be a burden, but you know what? We're also, if we don't do something like this, we're taking the opportunity in the future. The Unicors, the people don't come here just because, oh yeah, your sidewalks are great. You know, they need services, and our demographics are changing. I'm sure Mike, Councilor Buderick, been here all his life, could walk around with me and we could go, oh, remember when so-and-so lived there and so-and-so and so-and-so, but lots of changes. You know, this process began before, I think most of us were on council, maybe the mayor, 2017, time to get on with it. I'm a firm believer in recreational programming, and that's my educational background. Federal government steps up, City of Kingston steps up. Staff has found lots of opportunities there. One of our residents earlier said, geez, there's somebody missing from the table. So, you know, I'll just leave that to people. Comes down to it. I'm in favor of the project 100%, and I'm willing to pay the extra. I figured out what it would cost me, but I think it's time to move on, because if we don't do it now, it ain't happening, people. That's my blurb for today.
Thank you. Council, any further comments or statements at this time? Councilor Ennis.
Through the mayor, just to say, I think the the hub can be a cornerstone of our community and position ourselves to be an ever more vibrant community.
Thank you. Any other comments, statements, questions? I just have a brief statement here. I've sat quiet most of the night. For one thing, staff have already, anything that I could raise as a question has already been answered. So I thank the team for that. And I guess I want to start out with that. Thank you to the team. We've got excellent staff that have shown great leadership through this process. It's a new model for the township. It made me stop and think, because I've worked with conventional models of construction my whole life, and I know the downfalls of them. And so after doing a fair bit of study and a lot of information from staff and the presentation tonight, the IPD model provides a level of comfort that I've never had with a contract before. So I appreciate that, and it gives me a level of comfort for moving forward. And I also want to thank staff for bringing the recommendations forward. It took a little work to get them through, but you brought every option, and you provided great insight on every one of the options. And I always say that as long as we're given all the information and provided all of the options, it's our job to do the rest. And so I'm really thankful that we were provided with everything we needed to be able to work through it here this evening. So, sorry, that was actually my preamble. So I just wanted to make a statement that I realize that this is probably one of the most significant decisions that this council will make in this term. We've made some pretty significant ones in the last council, and this is the big one to start this council off. I see it that we are deciding if Loyalist Township will go forward, known as a community with aquatics, or one that does not. And I have heard a lot in the community of how precious the aquatics is. And I also believe that this is an investment for our residents. So all else aside, we're deciding tonight if we'll support building a $50 million building, which has a pool, but also retrofits the arena, upgrades the entire interior of the building, provides public spaces, captures energy produced from within the building, and utilizes it to reduce energy costs for the building. So when I was putting a lot of thought into this during and after reading the very in-depth report, I took out my tax bill because there's going to be a tax increase. And I worked out what it's going to cost me on the farm to be able to pay for this increase. But I also, this morning I took a look at, or I got thinking about my daughters. They went to school here. They went to that pool. They were taught how to swim, and they swim very well. I swim like a rock. So I've never had to concern myself with anything happening to them in a normal circumstance, because I could never get out to help them. That is peace of mind. Then I took a look at my grandsons, who the family is, they're living with us now. They're in the township, and we're looking at forwarding our family farm. They need to learn the same skills. They need to know how to swim. I don't know. They need to know. They need to know that they are going to be safe no matter where they go. I go out in the lake and I step off a bit of a cliff in the limestone on the bottom of the lake. I go down. If that happens to them, they'll swim around, have some fun, and come back. That's peace of mind for me. That's huge. I also, in thinking of this and looking at my tax bill, I also realized the increase in my tax bill would not, it would put about half a tank of fuel in my vehicle. And I would have to drive to Kingston or further for my grandsons to take those lessons. I can pay the increase in my tax bill cheaper than I can drive them somewhere else. But for me, as a person and as a resident, that's an investment. No pool would also mean no swimming for birthday parties, family swim times, or exercising in the pool. Eventually I will get old. And I may need those aquatics. Some say I'm old now with the last birthday. My wife and I could probably make use of some exercise in the pool in the future. So, and then I stopped and thought, if my family's going to miss out on this opportunity, every family in the township will miss out on an opportunity if a pool is not here. So I believe that we're somewhat in the same position that the township was in the early 1970s, when they had the option to put a pool, build a pool and provide it for the community. And the community was a lot smaller. And they got some funding, but they had to come up with a pile of money. And I look at it and I think that the only thing that we can do at this time is to continue maintaining this for our residents, for their safety and for their enjoyment. So I fully support this project moving forward, not only for the current residents of Wylist, but for the future ones as well. Thank you. So with that, council, any final comments? I'm going a little out of order again. With that, if no further comments, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Thank you. So we're down to confirmatory bylaw. Do we have a mover for the confirmatory bylaw? Councillor Prodrick, seconded by Councillor Willis. All in favor? Motion is carried. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Butrick, Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Motion is carried. We are adjourned at 9:21. Thank you.